Chapter 1492. The white light in the horsetail whisk was particularly dazzling, colliding with the bright red flames. Xiaobai subconsciously took a step back, and Baimei Daoist did not have it easy either, actually taking 2 steps back. Omega 81 Delta Chinese Net, this seemingly casual strike was enough to determine the winner. Everyone was stunned, incredulous. They looked left at Baimei Daoist, right at Xiaobai, speechless for a long time. Taking advantage of this gap, the young man had already fallen into Tang Zheng's hands without any suspense. His face was pale, and he waved his hands and feet, shouting, "What are you doing?" He was so shocked that he had fallen into Tang Zheng's hands that he broke out in a cold sweat. Seeing this scene, the others finally reacted. Baimei Daoist's reaction was the biggest. He immediately rushed forward, shouting, "Put him down, or I'll bury you in this wilderness." Tang Zheng's lips curled into a playful smile, saying, "Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue with such big words? You care so much about him. Who is he to you?" Baimei Daoist's body stiffened, and he stammered, "He's not anyone to me." Wild Dog tilted his head, and immediately corrected, "Baimei Daoist, he's clearly your son. How is he not anyone to you?" Baimei Daoist's face turned cold, and he glared fiercely at Wild Dog, reprimanding, "Wild Dog, if you don't speak, no one will think you're mute." Tang Zheng immediately understood and laughed loudly. "So that's how it is, they're father and son. No wonder you're so worried about him. Humph, it's the father's fault if the son doesn't teach him. Did he learn this habit of spouting shit from you?" Because the other party had spoken rudely, Tang Zheng did not say anything good to him. "You." Baimei Daoist gritted his teeth, speechless for a moment. "You dare to insult my father? Do you know who he is? He is the alliance leader of the righteous faction. With a single order, all the righteous faction members will chop you into minced meat." The young man fell into Tang Zheng's palm, but he was not content. He continued to shout arrogantly. Tang Zheng made a sound of surprise as he sized up Baimei Daoist. His gaze became serious as he said, "Righteous alliance leader. You can actually become an alliance leader with this little bit of cultivation?" He could already see that Baimei Daoist was at the second stage of the Mahayana stage, which was indeed not low, but for the leader of the Righteous Alliance to have such a low cultivation base, it was really quite low. But on second thought, he felt relieved. The living space of the righteous path was so miserable. They were chased by the natives of the realm beyond heaven and could only hide in this desolate and uninhabited land. This showed that their strength was indeed not strong. This bleak situation made his heart sink. Back then, when the devil race returned, most of their strength was not high. The Mahayana realm was already considered a top expert, not much different from the righteous path. "Scared now? Then obediently put me down and beg for my forgiveness. Then I can spare your life." Seeing Tang Zheng's reaction, the young man felt refreshed. Baimei Daoist raised his head, seeming to be quite proud of his identity. "Where do you get your confidence from?" Xiaobai did not like the other side and slapped the young man's face, saying disdainfully, "You dare to hit me?" The young man was stunned. He did not expect that Tang Zheng's lackey would dare to hit him. After all, Xiaobai had always called Tang Zheng master. The others had also heard it, and naturally did not put him in their eyes. Xiaobai was a member of the imperial family, so how could he be afraid of a young man? He curled his lips and slapped him again. The other side of the young man's face turned red again. The young man was completely stunned. Baimei Daoist's cheeks were red, as if the 2 slaps were on his face. He shouted sternly, "Stop! Who are you people? How dare you come here and behave so atrociously?" Baimei Daoist had already begun to suspect the identity of the 2 people. Tang Zheng kept denying that he was a demon, but Baimei Daoist actually believed him a little. Because, even if it was a demon, no one would dare to be so arrogant in front of him and make him lose face. Then the identity of these 2 people was particularly suspicious. Tang Zheng did not immediately reveal his identity. If the situation was different, perhaps he would have just said that he was from his hometown. But Baimei Daoist's attitude made him dispel this idea and decided to observe more. After all, these people had been exiled for hundreds of years and must have changed a lot. Tang Zheng would not be so naive as to tell all his information to the other side. One must always be on guard against others. As for our identity, you will naturally know in the future. Tang Zheng deliberately kept them in suspense. If you don't say, then it means that there is a problem, Bai Mei Daoist said coldly. Tang Zheng frowned slightly. Bai Mei Daoist's attitude made him unhappy, but he did not want to waste his breath on the other side. He said, "Call out the people from Kingsman. I have something to discuss with them." Kingsman. They were involved again. Bai Mei Daoist reprimanded. "If you want to see the people from Kingsman, you will have to get past you first." "Fine, if that's the case, then let me see what you are capable of." Tang Zheng did not say anything else. He swung his arm and threw the hostages in his hands away. The young man hurriedly ran behind Bai Mei Daoist and bared his teeth at Tang Zheng. His eyes were full of hatred. Bai Mei Daoist immediately gave a look to his left and right. The crowd behind him immediately parted like the tide. "Ah, Bai Mei Daoist, are you going to set up the Big Dipper array again? Haha, I am so lucky. This is going to be an eye-opener for me." Wild Dog shouted excitedly. He widened his eyes and stared at the group's every move. "Kid, be careful. This array is very dangerous. Be careful. You might lose your life." Wild Dog did not forget to remind Tang Zheng. Bai Mei Daoist glared at Wild Dog. He wanted to chop him into pieces. The Big Dipper array? Tang Zheng looked at the group with interest. He did not stop them. He had seen the power of Tian Qi, so he was not afraid of ordinary formations. It seemed that the Heavenly Dipper array was not simple, so he was interested in looking at it and studying it. Everyone was already in formation. Bai Mei Daoist was in the center. He stood proudly, exuding an unapproachable aura. The young man stood in the distance, glancing at Tang Zheng proudly. He gritted his teeth and said, "Kid, you are dead for daring to slap me. Humph, I will chop you into pieces." Although the righteous faction had declined, but because he was the son of the alliance leader, his status was noble. Countless people flattered him, and he had never suffered such humiliation. "Master, let me do it." Xiao Bai volunteered. Tang Zheng waved his hand and stepped forward. "I will test their Big Dipper array." He stepped forward. A ball of light blossomed under his feet. He walked in the air, dazzling rays of light blossoming under his feet. If one looked carefully, they would find that these rays of light looked like lotus flowers blooming with every step. This was the ability of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Although Tang Zheng did not deliberately use it, the Ksitigarbha Sutra had integrated into his words and actions. That was why the lotus flowers appeared without a trace. The Big Dipper array had finished accumulating power. Everyone was chanting and raising their hands. Specks of light rose from their palms and converged in the air. So. The rays of light were like meteors, shooting in one direction. Wild Dog was frightened. He had only heard of the terrifying power of the Big Dipper array. Now that he had seen it with his own eyes, his life was not in vain. One had to know that the reason why Bai Mei Daoist could sit on the throne of the righteous faction leader was because of this array. The righteous faction was weak. Even if they gathered everyone's strength, it would be very difficult to resist the pursuit of the natives of the sky beyond sky. But the Big Dipper array improved this problem. The Big Dipper array could gather everyone's strength and pour it into one person, causing that person's strength to rise to the peak. Bai Mei Daoist stood in the center of the array. Rays of light shot towards him from all directions. He was like the focus of a magnifying glass, receiving light and energy from all directions. Boom! A loud sound rang out as all of the light entered White-Brow's Daoist's body. He raised his head and roared towards the sky. His beard and eyebrows were all white. At this moment, not only were his eyebrows white, but his beard and head were also white. His appearance became crazed and even a bit ferocious. His whole body exuded a terrifying aura that swept towards Tang Zheng. "Master!" Xiao Bai called out in a low voice. Tang Zheng waved his hand slightly, indicating that he was fine. He raised the hidden mystic sword. Wong! The sword hummed loudly, and a sharp sword light shot out. Pooh! With a loud sound, that earth-shattering aura was completely shattered by this sword. It had no effect at all. Tang Zheng's casual sword strike did not frighten his opponent. After all, this was just a probing attack. The real show was yet to come. Bai Mei Daoist had finished accumulating power. He glared fiercely at Tang Zheng. With a flick of his horsetail whisk, the white horsetail whisk flew up and floated in the air. Chasing the wind and moon, Baimei Daoist roared, and a white light shot out from the horsetail whisk. Its speed was extremely fast, as if it was chasing the wind and moon. In an instant, it was in front of Tang Zheng. Its sharpness was not inferior to the sword chi at all. Tang Zheng shook his wrist and performed the Taiji 2 form swordplay. He had just learned a few new moves, so he quickly performed them to test his actual combat ability. A yin-yang fish appeared in the sky. It was formed by the sword chi. One was yin and the other was yang. Two black and white swords shot out from the fish's eyes. They intertwined and fell from the sky. Every time the two swords fell a certain distance, the sword chi became sharper. When it met the white light of the horsetail whisk, it was extremely sharp, as if it could tear the sky apart. Pooh! The sword light hit the white light, and the white light was split into two. The remaining white light seemed to have met its nemesis and hurriedly retreated back into the horsetail whisk. Looking carefully, only half of the whisk's whisk was left. It turned out that the white light was shot out after the whisk's whisk grew longer. Subduing the dragon and tiger, Baimei Daoist suffered a loss, but he did not give up. With a roar, he performed a new move. He pointed his finger at the horsetail whisk, and a drop of blood flew into the horsetail whisk, dyeing the white horsetail whisk red. The horsetail whisk immediately had a trace of bloody aura and became extremely dangerous. Chapter 1493. Subduing the dragon and tiger. The blood-red palms collided with the black shoulders, and the air seemed to freeze. Both sides were still, but this scene did not last for long. With a poochie sound, the two swords pierced through the blood-red palms and flew toward White Eyebrows Daoist. The blood-red palm collapsed and turned into streaks of light. The horsetail whisk in front of the White Eyebrows Daoist had changed greatly. Half of the whisk was broken, and it no longer had the power it had before. This, White Eyebrows Taoist was stunned, but when he heard the sound of something breaking through the air, he immediately realized the danger. He came to his senses, puffed up his cheeks, and shouted, "Wipe out the universe!" The horsetail whisk flew back into his hand. I held it upside down and stabbed it fiercely in front of me. Although it was in the air, it seemed to be stuck in a very solid rock. The horsetail whisk stood there steadily. Boom! A huge sound rang out from where it was stabbed, and a shockwave spread out in all directions. It was as if the universe had been turned upside down. Interesting. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted as he saw through the clues. This was the white-browed Daoist's desperate attack, so his strength was naturally not to be underestimated. The Big Dipper array gathered the power of many people and poured it into Baimei Daoist's body. Although his cultivation did not increase, his combat power increased exponentially. In a short time, his combat power soared to 4th grade Great Ascension stage. That's right, Tang Zheng was at the 4th stage of the Great Ascension stage, so he had a very accurate understanding of the white-brow Daoist's strength. However, Tang Zheng had a divine weapon like the hidden profound sword. How could he be afraid of Baimei Daoist? He clenched the hidden profound sword and simply shouted, "Slash!" The hidden sword of Xian slashed forward, and the yin-yang fish in the air began to change. They fell from the sky and became smaller and smaller. In the end, they gathered on the hidden sword of Xian. After one slash, the yin-yang fish and the swordlight became one. When the black and white swords encountered the erasing heaven and earth move, they had already been reduced to ashes. Tang Zheng's extremely proficient sword followed closely behind and flew in front of Daoist White Eyebrows. Rumble. It was a shocking blow. Endless light shot out from the point of explosion. In an instant, it was as if a sun had appeared in the sky above the wildlands. The light was so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. After a long time, the smoke dissipated and everything returned to normal. Everyone's ears, ringing. Tang Zheng and Xiaobai also took a few steps back, but nothing happened to them. On the other hand, the Big Dipper array was completely shattered and their opponents were scattered in the air. Many people even fell to the ground like cannonballs, smashing a big hole in the hard rock. Baimei Daoist and his father were one of them. They fell to the ground. Baimei Daoist was embedded in the rock, looking very awkward. He coughed violently, blood hanging from the corner of his mouth. He climbed up shakily from the rock and looked at the two people in the sky. He was so shocked that his soul almost left his body. He was sure that they were not demons. The demons did not have such powerful people. Then who could they be? The natives of the Beyond Sky? No. The natives of the Beyond Sky had always used their strength to crush others. They killed decisively. Why would they say more than a few words to them? Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he wanted to find a hole to hide in. But in the end, he resisted the impulse. With a red face, he gritted his teeth and silently looked for a solution. Fighting was not the best choice. This was a lesson learned in blood. What else could he do? He had to pretend to be obedient and figure out the other party's background first. Tang Jing and Xiao Bai looked at each other. Xiao Bai gave a thumbs up and praised, "Master, you're so powerful." Tang Zheng smiled faintly and landed on the ground with Xiao Bai. No one dared to come forward. When they saw him approaching, they retreated in all directions, not daring to confront him. Tang Zheng touched his nose and smiled in his heart. He had shown his power in this battle. It was time to talk properly. "Do you still want to fight?" Tang Zheng stared at Bai Mei Daoist and asked. Bai Mei Daoist gritted his teeth. For a moment, he did not know how to answer. But Wild Dog appeared out of nowhere again. With an eye-opening look, he clicked his tongue and praised. How would he dare to fight? I don't think anyone dares to fight with you. These words made Bai Mei Daoist want to cut him into pieces. Wild Dog did not know. He looked at Tang Zheng with admiration and asked, "How did you cultivate? How could you be so powerful? How many years have you cultivated?" A cultivator's age could not be judged by his appearance. When he cultivated to a certain level, he could change his appearance and stay young forever. After the battle just now, many people subconsciously thought that Tang Zheng must have cultivated for many years. Otherwise, he could not be so powerful. 2 years. Tang Zheng stretched out his fingers and gestured. 2 years. Wild Dog hesitated for a moment. He stared at Tang Zheng's 2 fingers as if he had seen a ghost. He thought he had heard wrong. Come on, even if he had said 20 years, he would not be so shocked. But Tang Zheng said 2 years. Wild Dog hurriedly turned his head to look at the others, as if wondering if he was hallucinating and had misheard. But he had seen the answer from the others' reactions. This man really said 2 years. What could he do in 2 years? Many people did not even reach the threshold, but he had become so powerful. Was he lying? But for a group of defeated people, it seemed that there was no need to lie. White Eyebrows Daoist swallowed his saliva, which was mixed with blood, and asked in bewilderment, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Let me see the people of Kingsaman." Tang Zheng calmly said, completely without any murderous aura. With a hurried glance, one would think that he was a harmless neighborhood boy. People under the eaves had to bow their heads. Bai Mei Daoist wanted to refuse, but he could not say it. He could only give his son a look and ordered, "Go and call the people of Kingsaman." Well, his son hesitated. "What are you waiting for? I told you to go." Bai Mei Daoist lost his temper and roared. His son didn't dare to hesitate any longer. Like a wisp of smoke, he drilled into a cave. Tang Zheng's gaze slightly shifted as he stared at the cave. He thought to himself that there was actually a completely different world below. These people of the good faction were indeed wronged. They were forced to hide in caves. The Wild Dog could no longer take his eyes off Tang Zheng. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he could not hold back his curiosity. He leaned over and asked, "Hey, how did you cultivate? Can you tell me a little trick? I have practiced for most of my life and only reached the Yuanying state. I am far from you." Tang Zheng had a good impression of Wild Dog. He even had a better impression of him than Bai Mei Daoist and his son. Then he carefully observed Wild Dog. He couldn't help but be shocked. Although this Wild Dog was ugly, its cultivation talent was definitely not bad. It was even better than most people, and even better than the White Eyebrows Taoist. "Why are you only at the Yuanying state?" Tang Zheng asked. Wild Dog blushed and said angrily, "I am just guessing. No sect is willing to take in people like me." His words could not hide his low mood, and even a little self-abasement. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1494. Wild Dog's cheeks were red and he was obviously embarrassed, which made him look even uglier. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, ignored his ugliness and was shocked by his words and cultivation. Wild Dog did not have a master to guide him. He had reached the realm of yuanying by himself. This was not something that ordinary people could do. If Tang Zheng did not have Tian Chanzi's guidance and the ancient clear heaven scroll, it was almost impossible for him to advance by leaps and bounds. Although Wild Dog did not reach Tang Zheng's cultivation, his strength was not bad. It could be seen that his talent was good, and he could definitely beat many people. In Tang Zheng's eyes, Wild Dog's talent was better than Baimei Daoist. If he was given the same cultivation conditions, Wild Dog's cultivation would definitely be higher than Baimei Daoist. Seeing Tang Zheng's silence, Wild Dog thought that he was being looked down upon. However, he was already used to this and did not find it strange. Still, he clenched his teeth and said, "I believe that one day, I will definitely not lose to others." Tang Zheng's eyes lit up and he stared at him. He said in a deep voice, "I believe in you." "What?" The Wild Dog raised its head and stared at Tang Zheng with its large, suspicious eyes, wondering if it was hearing things. "You believe in me?" he asked doubtfully. Tang Zheng nodded. "Yes, I believe that you will not lose to others and make those who once looked down on you feel ashamed." This tone was very sincere and sincere, not like ridicule, which made Wild Dog stunned for a moment. Since he was a child, he had never heard other people's affirmation and performance, but a stranger had expressed such great affirmation to him. He was at a loss and thought that he was dreaming. He was sure that Tang Zheng was not lying to him, but really expressing his inner opinion. Why do you believe in me?" Wild Dog asked puzzledly. Tang Zheng pointed to the others and said, "You are more talented than them, and you work so hard. I have no reason not to believe this." "Ha ha ha." Mocking laughter rang out from the crowd, and it was especially ear-piercing. When Tang Zheng looked at the crowd, the laughter stopped abruptly. Obviously, these people thought that Tang Zheng's words were a fantasy. Baimei Daoist frowned and stared at Wild Dog deeply, as if trying to figure out whether he was real or not. However, he did not have Tang Zheng's vision, so he did not see any clues. In his eyes, the Wild Dog was no different from a normal dog. "Thank you." Wild Dog looked at Tang Zheng excitedly, his emotions fluctuating like a tidal wave that never stopped rolling. Dong dong dong. A burst of hurried footsteps disrupted this scene. Under the lead of that young man, the distinct Void Sect's people walked over. The mood of the distinct Void Sect's people was very gloomy. They hung their heads dejectedly like stray dogs. The truth was indeed so. They had already lost their homes and caused other righteous path cultivators to leave their homes and become homeless. In the eyes of others, the people of Kingsaman were scourges. They wanted to stay as far away as possible. Tang Zheng looked up. He did not have a deep impression of the people of Kingsaman after they left in a hurry last time. However, he remembered a few faces. He recognized a few familiar faces in the crowd. These people were indeed from Kingsaman. The people of Kingsaman looked at the scene in confusion. They had also seen the battle in the sky and were deeply shocked. In their eyes, Baimei Daoist was already an invincible figure. They did not expect that an outsider could defeat Baimei Daoist so easily. Everyone saw this scene. Baimei Daoist's strength was questioned like never before. The people of Kingsaman did not expect that these people were here for them. When they heard the order to come here, they were all stunned. In the end, a few people of high status were chosen and led by the sect master. The people of Kingsaman looked at Tang Zheng and Xiaobai suspiciously. They tried hard to recall, but in the end, they were sure that they had not seen these two people anywhere. But why were these two people looking for them? Baimei Daoist waved at the people of Kingsaman and said, "Taik Suzi, these two people are here for Kingsaman. Could it be that Taik Suzi is acquainted with some powerful cultivators? You're really good at hiding." Even an idiot could tell that these words were not friendly. Tang Zheng frowned but did not say anything. Instead, he looked at the people who had come. His gaze fell on Taik Suzi first. Back when they were fighting against the natives of the outer world, he was the strongest fighter. It was obvious that he was the leader of this group. He was right. Although Kingsaman had been on the decline for a long time, it was still a sect and naturally had its own group of people. This person's name was Taiksuzi. He was the current sect master of Kingsaman. Taiksuzi was shocked when he heard Baimei Daoist's words. He was furious, but he did not dare to show it. He said angrily, "You're exaggerating, sect master. I don't know these people, and I don't know why they came to Kingsaman. You don't know them, but they lied to you and came to you. Who do you think will believe that?" Baimei Daoist said sarcastically. "Yes, we don't believe it." Many people echoed. It was obvious that they were on the same side as Baimei Daoist. Taishuzi's expression immediately became very unsightly. He looked left and right, not knowing what to do. He had long since known that the distinct Void sect was in a very difficult situation. During this period of time, he had been very cautious, keeping his tail between his legs. However, he hadn't expected that these people still wouldn't let him go and would make things difficult for him at every turn. After all, Kingsaman was Tian Chanzi's sect. It was also Feng Shishir's sect. He would not stand by and watch Kingsaman suffer. He took a step forward and walked in front of Taiksuzi. He said, "Everyone from Kingsaman, don't worry. I'm not a bad person. I'm a close friend of a senior from Kingsaman. That's why I'm here to look for you." A close friend of a senior from our sect? Taiksuzi and the others were shocked. They were too familiar with this story. They would never forget it even if they were to die. Moreover, this voice was too familiar. Coupled with these words, they immediately recalled the incident that had happened not long ago. A mysterious voice had scared off the natives of the realm beyond heaven, allowing the final flame of the distinct Void sect to survive. They would never forget this kindness. This matter was classified as a secret by the distinct Void sect and was not leaked to the outside world. Thus, no one knew the inside story. However, when they saw Taiksuzi and the others' expressions change, the others immediately noticed something was wrong. Their eyes lit up and they stared at both sides without blinking. "Senior, is that you?" Taiksuzi gulped and asked suspiciously. He chose to address them as senior after careful consideration. Since Tangzhong was a close friend of a senior from Kingsaman, it was natural for him to address them as senior. They would not look down on Tangzhong just because of his young appearance. Moreover, they were indebted to him for saving their lives. They would address him as senior from the bottom of their hearts. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1495. The word senior confused the others. After all, Taishuzi was a sect master. Why would he call a stranger senior for no reason? Baimei Daoist's eyes darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. Tang Zheng saw the urgency in Taiksuzi's eyes and understood the meaning behind his words. It was obvious that Taiksuzi recognized him as the person who saved Kingsaman. He smiled faintly and said calmly, "It's me. It's really you." Taiksuzi was so surprised that he almost screamed. His voice rose a few decibels as he stared at him, unwilling to look away. Back then, he had only heard his voice. From now on, Taiksuzi would remember this face. Everyone in Kingsaman would remember this face. This was their savior. Not only Taiksuzi, but the other Kingsaman people also looked at Tangzhong with eager eyes. The others were stunned. They wondered why the Kingsaman people were all bewitched. "Senior, thank you for saving us last time." Taiksuzi thanked him sincerely. Tangzhong waved his hand. "It was nothing. Besides, we go way back." "What? Taiksuzi, you're saying that he was the one who saved you last time when you were besieged?" Baimei Daoist raised his eyebrows. He immediately grasped the main point. Kingsaman was no stranger to the incident where Kingsaman was almost annihilated. Moreover, it was rumored that a mysterious person had saved Kingsaman. It was precisely because of this that the natives of Beyond Avalon hated the righteous path and started hunting them down with unprecedented intensity. Moreover, it was rumored that the expert who saved Kingsaman had always been the target of the natives of Beyond Avalon. The righteous path was just an innocent bystander. That was all that was known to the outside world, but no further details were known. This was Kingsaman's secret. After hearing Baimei Daoist's question, Taiksuzi hesitated and glanced at Tangzhong, not knowing how to answer Baimei Daoist. He secretly blamed himself for being so agitated and blurting out these things in a moment of desperation. Baimei Daoist looked at Taik Suzi's attitude and became furious. Taik Suzi, I can't order you to do anything, right? Humph, don't forget, I'm the leader of the Righteous Alliance. Could it be that you're scheming something that you don't want your fellow Taoists to know about? This time, everyone has suffered an unexpected calamity because of you. You have to make it clear. Don't think you can get away with it. Baimei Daoist turned hostile and aggressive. The others also acted as if they had eaten gunpowder. They angrily surrounded the few of them and looked like they wouldn't give up. Taik Suzi was apprehensive, but he didn't back down. He mustered up his courage and said, Alliance leader, how could I be scheming something? This accusation is too big. I, Kingsaman, can't bear it. Baimei Daoist gritted his teeth and said, Are you saying that I'm framing you? Everyone is here. Everyone can be the judge. Which one of us hasn't been harmed by you, Kingsaman? Yet you're acting all mysterious and mystifying. Seeing Kingsaman being mocked like this, Tang Zheng couldn't sit idly by. His face darkened and said, Baimei Daoist, I was the one who saved Kingsaman. So what? So what? Humph, that means the rumors are true. The natives of Sky Beyond Sky have been chasing you. They couldn't find you, so they targeted us. That's why we were forced to escape to this place where even birds don't shit. Baimei Daoist said sarcastically. Tang Zheng sneered and said jokingly, Aren't you the self-proclaimed leader of the Righteous Alliance? Why are you running? Could it be that running away was the only way out? I think if you continue to run like this, all the souls of the Righteous Alliance will be chased away by you. Tang Jing glanced around. The Righteous Alliance was indeed filled with a declining aura. They didn't have the spirit that a strong cultivator should have. Baimei Daoist was ridiculed. He was furious and scolded. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak to me like this? Your origins are unknown, and you've implicated us. This debt, we should settle it with you. Tang Zheng clapped his hands and said, Then you're welcome to settle it with me. After experiencing the battle just now, he already had a rough understanding of the Righteous Alliance's strength. Naturally, he was fearless. Just one sentence was enough to stop Baimei Daoist. He didn't have any leeway to resist. He stood there in a daze. He couldn't advance or retreat. He was in a dilemma. The others looked at Baimei Daoist. Seeing that he didn't react, they couldn't help but sigh. This was the alliance leader that they had chosen. In the end, he couldn't move forward. It really made them sigh. Baimei Daoist gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. But he still didn't dare to move, because he knew that he wasn't Tang Zheng's opponent. Even the Big Dipper array couldn't defeat Tang Zheng. What else could he do? Since you don't dare to make a move, then don't blabber. Xiaobai snorted disdainfully, Master. You can continue speaking. If anyone dares to blabber, I'll shut them up. Xiaobai's aura was very sharp. No one dared to ignore him. Not to mention, the moves that Xiaobai had revealed earlier made it clear that he was an expert. No one dared to go against him. Just the two of them were able to intimidate over 100 people. It could be seen that the Righteous Alliance had suffered a terrible blow. They didn't even have the slightest bit of confidence. Tang Jing also sighed inwardly. In the past, he still had great hopes for the Righteous Alliance. But now, he realized that these were all unrealistic fantasies. The Righteous Alliance's boldness was even inferior to the demon race. The demon race's aggressiveness was far greater than the Righteous Alliance's. Moreover, they would find their own way to break out of the encirclement and return to the sky beyond heaven. But the Righteous Alliance had always been trapped in the sky beyond heaven. In fact, the Righteous Alliance wasn't unified internally. This was heartbreaking. Didn't you boast that you're very powerful? Then if you have the ability, go find the natives of the sky beyond heaven. What are you doing in front of us? Who said I won't find the natives of the sky beyond heaven? Tang Jing asked. What? Everyone was shocked. They thought that they had heard wrongly. I'm going to find the natives of the sky beyond heaven, Tang Zheng said resolutely. He had planned this in advance. It was just that he didn't understand the situation of the sky beyond heaven. Since he had encountered the Righteous Alliance, he naturally had to ask them about it. He didn't have any requests for these Righteous Alliance members. Moreover, seeing these Righteous Alliance members, he was extremely disappointed. Everyone looked at him in disbelief. They felt that he was most likely boasting. Who didn't know how to make irresponsible remarks? Tang Zheng didn't intend to persuade anyone. He directly asked Taixuzi, "First, tell me about the current situation of the sky beyond heaven. What's the situation of the natives of the sky beyond heaven?" As soon as these words came out, it caused another round of exclamations. No one expected Tang Zheng to ask this. After all, this was common knowledge. No one would go through so much trouble to ask such a common question. Many people couldn't guess the reason behind it. Baimei Daoist lowered his head thoughtfully. The origins of these two people are very strange. It's as if they appeared out of thin air. After so many years, I've never heard of such a person. After all, such powerful people are definitely not unknown people. As the leader of the Righteous Alliance, how could I not have heard of them? Moreover, they asked this question the moment they arrived. It's really too strange. Then where did they come from? Could it be that they came from another world? He had a flash of inspiration and an unbelievable idea popped up. That's not very possible, right? He shook his head and rejected this idea. After all, this was too shocking. In these hundreds of years, he had never heard of anyone who could break through the spatial restriction and come to the sky beyond heaven. Baimei Daoist was no stranger to the spatial restriction. It was just that he didn't have the ability to break through the spatial restriction. Impossible, impossible. How could he have the ability to break through the spatial restriction? I must be imagining things. However, after thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure out Tang Zheng's origin. Although Taixuzi had many doubts in his heart, he still said everything he knew. The situation in the sky beyond heaven is very complicated. In the past, when the Devil Clan was still around, there were a total of 4 forces. Now that the Devil Clan is gone, there are only 3 forces left. 3 forces? How can there be 3 forces? Tang Zheng was shocked. Xiaobai raised an eyebrow. He was also attracted. According to common sense, shouldn't there be only the Righteous Alliance and the natives of the sky beyond heaven? Where did the 3rd force come from? Seeing that the two of them didn't understand the situation in the sky beyond heaven, many people had more doubts in their hearts. However, no one interjected. Just now, they were all shocked by Tang Zheng's aura. Taixuzi continued, "The Righteous Alliance is naturally one of them. The other 2 forces are the natives of the sky beyond heaven." There are 2 forces in the natives of the sky beyond heaven? Yes, there are 2 forces, one big and one small. Moreover, we've encountered them before. The big force is our sworn enemy and wants to kill us. These are the Righteous Alliance, while the small force coexists peacefully with us. They don't take the initiative to cause trouble and are known as the opposition. The Righteous Alliance and the opposition? Tang Zheng and Xiaobai looked at each other. This was indeed a new piece of news. Who was the opposition? How dare they go against the Righteous Alliance? From what Tang Zheng had seen and heard last time, the official power was extremely strong. Who would eat a bear's heart and leopard's guts to go against them? Actually, we're also very curious about the identity of the opposition. However, we're still outsiders to the sky beyond heaven. After so many years, we still haven't figured it out. Taixuzi said and cast a meaningful look at Tang Zheng. Back then, when Tang Zheng was bluffing and scaring the natives of the sky beyond heaven, he only revealed a little bit of information. He called those people traitors. Therefore, Taixuzi guessed something. Could it be that Tang Zheng was related to the opposition? Tang Zheng understood the look in Taixuzi's eyes, but he couldn't answer him. After all, he didn't know the identity of the opposition. Didn't Xiaobai say that the royal family has been completely wiped out? The red lunar beast also said that the remaining royal family members were all sacrificed. Who would dare to go against the Righteous Alliance? Isn't this the same as eating a bear's heart and a leopard's guts? Tang Zheng shook his head and said in amazement, "It seems that no world is united. Even the sky beyond heaven is divided into 2 forces. If that's the case, I'm interested in visiting the opposition." To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1496. As Taixuzi explained, Tang Zheng and Xiaobai gained a general understanding of the situation in Beyond Avalon. However, they were both interested in the so-called opposition. 81 Chinese Omega Network. No matter who the opposition was, since they dared to openly oppose the government, it was naturally possible to rope them in. When he heard that Tang Jing wanted to visit this power, Baimei Daoist snorted and said, "Humph, this group of people is very secretive. We haven't been able to find them after so many years. You want to visit them? What a fool's dream." After hearing this ridicule, Tang Zheng did not back down. He glanced at him and said, "Just because you can't find them doesn't mean that others can't." White eyebrows Daoist suddenly froze. He held his breath and said, "Then you think that you're blind and don't know anything, but you're more powerful than all of us righteous Dao people?" All these years, the good faction had not given up on finding the opposition. After all, the enemy of one's enemy could become one's friend. However, things did not go according to plan. In the end, they came up empty-handed. Tang Zheng did not say anything. The answer was self-evident. Baimei Daoist and the other people's expressions darkened. However, the people of Kingsaman did not have much of a reaction. They seemed to believe Tang Zheng's words. After all, they had seen how Tang Zheng could scare off the enemy with just a few words. Therefore, they were very confident in his abilities. Since they had confirmed their target, Tang Zheng did not plan to argue with Baimei Daoist. Since they were on different paths, they could not work together. After all, they would not be able to provide any valuable clues. "Kingsaman is with us. What else can we do?" Tang Zheng asked Taixuzi. Taixuzi immediately fell into a dilemma. This was not only related to his life and safety, but also to the hundreds of people in Kingsaman. This was not a decision he could make with just a few words. After all, he had experienced the dangers of the outside world. If anything happened to him, he would be a sinner in Kingsaman. However, Tang Zheng had saved everyone in Kingsaman, and his strength was extraordinary. If they followed him, they might have a better future than staying in the wildlands. Baimei Daoist's expression changed drastically. He stared at Taixuzi sternly and said, "Taixuzi, if you want to leave, you will be betraying the righteous path. Think about the consequences. From now on, you can forget about having a foothold in Kingsaman." Baimei Daoist's direct threat made Tang Zheng's brows furrow even tighter. But after a while, he figured out the whole story. The reason Baimei Daoist had such a big reaction and said such harsh words was because he was afraid of something. Although Kingsaman was a small sect, it was still a member of the righteous path. If Baimei Daoist allowed Kingsaman to leave, there would definitely be a crack in the alliance of the righteous sects. If Baimei Daoist's authority was challenged and questioned, others would question it again in the future. Then, other sects would be tempted to leave the alliance of the righteous sects. After all, no one wanted to be suppressed by others, especially the leaders of the various sections. In the past, no one had ever taken the lead. Now that Taixuzi had taken the lead, others would naturally follow suit. This concerned the survival of the alliance of the righteous sects. Baimei Daoist dared not be careless. Taixuzi was a little slower, but he also understood this point. His departure would not only affect the safety of Kingsaman, but also the survival of the alliance of the righteous sects. What should he do? Taixuzi looked left and right. For a moment, he was unsure of what to do. After all, he did not know Tang Zheng well. Once he left the alliance of the righteous sects, he would be in great danger. Staying in the wildlands would at least be safe for the time being. Most importantly, Baimei Daoist was not a kind person. Instead, he was a narrow-minded person. He would definitely deal with those who dared to betray him in public. The danger that Kingsaman would face would not only come from the officials of the Beyond Avalon, but also from Baimei Daoist. It would not be a good feeling to be attacked from both sides. Taixuzi wanted to retreat. He looked at Tang Zheng with shame and lowered his head. He said, "Senior, I'm sorry. Kingsaman is very weak after this catastrophe. We can't take it anymore. We need to recuperate." Before he could finish, Tang Zheng waved his hand and interrupted him. He comforted him. "Don't feel burdened. I respect your decision." As he spoke, his eyes became sharp, like a sharp knife shining with cold light. He glanced around fiercely and finally, his eyes fell on Daoist white eyebrows. "However, if anyone dares to cause trouble for Kingsaman, they will be going against me. When the time comes, I will make them regret ever being born into this world." This sentence was too threatening. This was the effect that Tangzheng wanted. He wanted to make a direct threat. Even if you don't want to admit defeat, you have to hold it in. Baimei Daoist snorted coldly. His expression was extremely ugly. Taixuzi was very excited. This was equivalent to Tangzheng giving Kingsamin a protective talisman. At least, Baimei Daoist would not dare to act rashly for the time being. This was more than enough. Senior, may I know your name? Everyone in Kingsamin will remember your great kindness in the future. Taixuzi said gratefully, My name is Tangzheng. Tangzheng spoke the truth. We will meet again in the future. Taixuzi asked, Senior Tang, may I know which senior in my sect you know? Tangzheng hesitated. He wanted to say Tian Chanzi's name, but he held back in the end. He said, You will know when you meet him in the future. There is still a senior in my sect who is still alive? Of course. Not only the people of Kingsamin, but everyone else was also shocked. In the world of cultivation, a senior in a sect was a real master. He could even decide the rise and fall of a sect. Although the distinct Void sect was currently in decline, if this senior were to return, then the distinct Void sect might have a chance to soar into the sky and regain its former glory. At that moment, not only Baimei Daoist, but also the other orthodox cultivators looked at Kingsamin in a different light. They did not dare to look down on them as before. Tangzheng turned around and left. Under the gazes of the crowd, he gradually walked away, leaving behind a group of people in the savage land. They looked at each other in dismay and fell into a long period of shock. After a long time, the orthodox cultivators went underground again. Only the cold wind swept over the desolate rocks, as if it was telling the story of what had just happened. No one noticed, but a figure quietly appeared on the ground and quickly chased in the direction Tangzheng had left. In a natural cave, after being carved and chiseled by knives and axes, it looked magnificent and magnificent. It did not fit in with the environment of the wildlands. Baimei Daoist and his son sat facing each other. They could not hide the burning hatred in their eyes. Father, are we just going to take it? I can't take this lying down. Baimei Daoist looked at his son and said in a low voice, Do you know why I named you Sacrificing Life? I want you to sacrifice the lives of others in order to protect yourself, even the lives of everyone in the world. A trifling person of unknown origin also wants to give orders in my territory and break the pattern. Humph, then we can only sacrifice their lives. Daoist Master White Eyebrows said with a murderous aura. Chapter 1497. White-Brow Taoist Priest smirked and smirked. Don't you remember what happened to us? Shiming nodded. Of course I remember. It was Kingsamin. 81st Chinese Network. Baimei Daoist shook his head. No, you've only grasped the surface of the problem. What about the deeper reason? The deeper reason? Shiming fell into deep thought. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he couldn't help but ask, Father, are you saying that the realm beyond heaven's officials are hunting down that Tang guy? Baimei Daoist looked at him approvingly. You're worth teaching, my son. You're a smart man after all. Shiming scratched his head and laughed mischievously. That's the crux of the matter. The realm beyond heaven's officials have been hunting down that Tang guy. If we tell them about his whereabouts, what do you think will happen? Baimei Daoist asked. Shiming's eyes shone brighter and brighter, as if he could already foresee that scene. He couldn't help but smile coldly. That guy surnamed Tang is dead for sure. His foundation is also dead for sure, Shiming asserted. When the time comes, we'll deal with Kingsamin. That sect has completely declined and should disappear from this world. Baimei Daoist's tone was calm, but his words were chilling. Then how are we going to inform the realm beyond heaven's officials? Shiming asked worriedly. This was a thorny problem. Both sides were enemies, and there was no channel for communication. Moreover, this matter couldn't be made known to others. After all, it was a conspiracy and not something to be proud of. I've been thinking about this problem, Daoist White Eyebrows muttered. His gaze fell on Saming. Saming, you've always been under my protection. Everything has been smooth sailing. After experiencing this, I think it's necessary for you to gain some experience. A sapling in a greenhouse can't grow into a towering tree. Only by being battered by the wind and rain can you become a pillar of support. Ximing's complexion immediately changed. It became extremely unsightly and turned deathly white. He had already understood the profound meaning behind his father's words. "Father, you want me to pass on the message?" Ximing asked while trembling with fear. Baimei Daoist nodded and said, "Yes, this matter can only be between you and me. Only the heavens and the earth can know about it. No third party can know about it, so I can't let anyone else know about it. I can only ask you to make this trip." But Gong Ming immediately retorted, "That's a tiger's den. I can't guarantee my life." Baimei Daoist said with a cold face, "So what if it's a dragon's lair or a tiger's den?" "It's precisely because it's a dragon's lair or a tiger's den. After barging in and coming out alive, that's the true tempering. You'll grow into an indomitable man, and I'll pass this position to you in the future." She had a bellyful of bitterness. Just as she was about to continue complaining, she was frightened by her father's sharp gaze and didn't dare to continue arguing. Baimei Daoist patted Ximing's shoulder and said earnestly, "I'm not sending you to harm you." Ximing's face was uglier than crying. She cursed in her heart, "If this isn't harming me, then what is it? Are you my father? I'm sending you not only to pass on the message, but also to do something more important. Now that the demons have left, we, the righteous path, will have to face the sky beyond heaven's officials. If we can't resolve this conflict, then our days will be very difficult. Don't tell me you want to hole up in this god-forsaken place for the rest of your life?" "Of course not." Ximing shook his head without hesitation. "I can't wait to leave this damned place." "That's right. The ultimate goal of your trip is to ensure that we can leave this damned place." Ximing tilted her head. She didn't really understand what was going on. Baimei Daoist said patiently, "In all these years, have you ever seen the sky beyond heaven's officials mobilize so many people? Although they often had conflicts with us in the past, has it ever been this serious?" "No, never." "That's right. Then what does this mean?" "It means that surname Tang is extraordinary. He's very important to the sky beyond heaven's officials. That's why they're mobilizing so many people." Ximing suddenly understood. "Smart. Since that surname Tang is so important, then he's our bargaining chip. I believe they'll agree to our conditions." "What are our conditions?" "We want the sky beyond heaven's officials to guarantee that they won't chase after us from now on. Furthermore, they want us to settle down in a certain area. It definitely can't be this godforsaken wildlands." Baimei Daoist didn't specify a specific area. After all, he couldn't completely understand the other party's thoughts. In short, as long as it wasn't this wildlands, anywhere would be 100 times better than here. Then will they agree? Ximing's heart trembled. He felt that his conditions were too many. He had never heard of the sky beyond heaven's officials discussing conditions with anyone before. Baimei Daoist hesitated for a moment, then said, "If they don't agree, then they'll never know where that surname Tang is. You only need to tell them exactly what I said. I believe they'll make the right choice." Ximing's face was bitter. Although this mission was very dangerous and was tantamount to pulling chestnuts out of the fire, if they succeeded, then the benefits to them were self-evident. Baimei Daoist's position would become even more stable. No one would be able to shake his position. Naturally, Ximing would also benefit greatly. This would be a decisive advantage for him when he inherited the position of Alliance Master in the future. Effort and return are directly proportional. If you want to gain more, then you must pay more and take more risks. You must understand this principle. Baimei Daoist earnestly advised. "I understand. I'll go right away." Ximing didn't refuse. He decided to take this risk and pull chestnuts out of the fire. Everyone was clear about the sky beyond heaven's official territory. Thus, Ximing's difficulty was how to guarantee that he wouldn't be killed on the spot before he could say what he wanted. After all, there were many experts on the other side. With Ximing's cultivation, he might not be a match for them. If he were to be killed before he could even say what he wanted, then he would have died an unjust death. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to rest in peace. Baimei Daoist heavily patted Ximing's shoulder a few times and said earnestly, "Son, I'll leave everything to you. This matter concerns the future of us father and son, so we can't be careless. After you go out, You must be careful and endure as much as you can. When we soar into the sky in the future, then we'll be able to get back all the grievances. Ximing seemed to be able to see a bright future for himself. At that time, who would dare to disrespect him? Surname Tang, if I have the chance, I'll definitely kill you with my own hands. Ximing silently gritted his teeth. Tang Jing naturally didn't know that Bai Mei Daoist and his son had leaked information to the Sky Beyond Heaven's officials. He had greatly overestimated the character of this pair of father and son. Chapter 1498. A man chased after them at lightning speed. When he took a closer look, he was slightly surprised. It was not an enemy, but an acquaintance, Wild Dog. 81 Chinese network Wild Dog stopped in front of them, panting, his face ruddy, and hurriedly said, "Fortunately, I caught up with you. You are so fast that I have used up all my strength." Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. Wild Dog was much more straightforward than Bai Mei Daoist. He spoke without thinking, which suited Tang Zheng's temper. "Why are you chasing us?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. Wild Dog smiled and said slyly, "I won't fit in if I stay. It's not like you didn't see the way Bai Mei Daoist looked at me, as if he wanted to cut me into pieces." Tang Zheng recalled and found that it was true. Bai Mei Daoist is not a kind man. If I stay, I will not have a good result. I am not like Taixuzi. After all, he has a sect behind him. I am just a lonely ghost. It is too easy for Bai Mei Daoist to deal with me. Wild Dog talked incessantly. He was very shrewd, which seemed to be very different from his appearance. "You are smart," Tang Zheng said. Wild Dog smiled bitterly. "If I didn't have this little bit of cleverness, I don't know how many times I would have died. After all, I am not like those big sections. I have a strong foundation. No one cares if I die." Tang Jing nodded secretly. Wild Dog was alone. Under the attack of various forces, he could survive until now. This was not something that could be described as cleverness. "Since you have left Bai Mei Daoist, what is the use of chasing us?" "Hey, of course it is useful. Leaving the barbarian land, it is very dangerous outside. With my strength, I don't even know how I died. How dare I go alone?" Tang Zheng smiled. "You are open and above board. I have this little bit of strength, and you found it," Wild Dog said humorously. "You want to go with us? But the place we are going to is very dangerous. Aren't you afraid? We're going to look for the opposition. It's hard to predict how dangerous it will be," Tang Jing asked deliberately. Wild Dog shrugged, looking fearless. "It's safer to follow you than to stay. Besides, it's precisely because you went to find the opposition that I came to catch up." Tang Zheng heard the subtle meaning in his words. He thought for a moment and asked curiously, "Do you know anything about the opposition?" Wild Dog was stunned for a while. He raised his thumb high and praised, "Amazing. I didn't say a word, but you guessed it. You are really a master. It seems that my decision to catch up with you this time is really wise." Tang Zheng's head moved. He happened to be in the dark. If Wild Dog knew the news of the opposition, it would be like sending a light to him in the dark. However, he did not rush to express his excitement. Instead, he calmed down. After all, Wild Dog was a member of the righteous faction. They had not known each other for long and did not know each other well. One could not judge a person by their appearance. One could not judge a person's character just by a few words. Therefore, Tang Zheng pretended to be deep and unfathomable. Seeing that Tang Zheng was silent, Wild Dog became anxious. If Tang Zheng did not believe him, or did not accept him, then he would be in trouble, because the news of his departure must have reached Bai Mei Daoist's ears. His way out had been blocked. It was impossible for him to leave the barbarian land alone. That would only lead to faster death. He looked at Tang Zheng excitedly and asked, "You don't believe me? Don't. I really know the news of the opposition. I'm not lying to you." Tang Zheng was still silent. His eyes were like searchlights, staring at him with bright eyes. Wild Dog knew that if he could not tell the truth, the other party would never believe him. The other party was a smart person and was not so easy to fool. Of course, he did not intend to fool Tang Zheng. He really had something. He thought for a moment and said, "I am a lonely ghost. I have to travel north and south and cultivate with difficulty. But once I passed by a place, I met a mysterious team. The other party was a native of Sky Beyond Sky. I observed them for a long time and found that they were not from the government. Since they were not from the government, their identity was obvious. They could only be from the opposition. Besides, it is impossible for the government to go to such a dangerous place. Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. He did not expect Wild Dog to know the clues. He said without a smile, "Dangerous place. Where is that?" "Suicide Valley." "Suicide Valley? Where is that?" Tang Zheng asked in surprise. Wild Dog was stunned. He looked at Tang Zheng as if he was looking at an alien and said, "You don't know about Suicide Valley. This is known to everyone in Sky Beyond Sky. It is a dangerous place where no one is allowed to enter. Even the government does not dare to set foot in it." Previously, when Tang Zheng asked Taik Suzy about the situation in Sky Beyond Sky, it gave people a feeling that he did not seem to be from this world. How could he not know anything? But perhaps there was another explanation. That was, he had been in seclusion for too long, so he did not know the situation outside. This was why he had this question. Now he did not even know about Suicide Valley. He had never even heard of this name. This was very strange. People in Sky Beyond Sky, whether old people or children, almost everyone knew about Suicide Valley. It was said that the first thing a child could remember was to never set foot in Suicide Valley. Wild Dog swallowed his saliva and asked, "Where did you come from?" Tang Zheng's head was cold. He knew that his words must have revealed a flaw, but he was not in a hurry. Wild Dog's guess alone was not enough to pose any threat to him. This question, "Do you really want to know?" The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth hooked up as he asked with a smile that was not a smile. Wild Dog's heart trembled. He was really looking for death. How could he ask this question so rashly? This must be the other party's secret. If he knew, his life would be in danger. After all, only the dead could keep secrets the best. Wild Dog really wanted to slap himself in the face. He had no control over his mouth. Wasn't he courting death? No, I'm just saying it casually. Don't take it seriously. Wild Dog immediately said, looking at Tang Zheng pleadingly. He seemed to be saying, "Don't kill me. I don't know anything. I won't say anything." Tang Zheng was just scaring him. He didn't really want to do anything to him. Seeing that it was about time, he said, "Then can you take us to Suicide Valley?" Wild Dog swallowed his saliva. He wanted to refuse, but he couldn't say it out loud. He could only bitterly say, "All right." The Suicide Valley was a dangerous place, and he didn't know if he would be able to leave after entering. Last time, he didn't accidentally enter the Suicide Valley, but was chased by someone. He had no choice but to escape into the Suicide Valley, and only then was he able to escape the pursuit. However, he didn't dare to go deep. After lurking in the periphery for a period of time and seeing the natives of Sky Beyond Sky from afar, he didn't dare to go deep. He ran wildly and escaped from Suicide Valley. Wild Dog also got on the somersault cloud. He curiously stepped on it a few times and clicked his tongue in wonder. This was a real cloud. He had thought that it was a magic treasure that used clouds as a disguise. Now, it seemed that his knowledge was too shallow. Chapter 1499. The somersault cloud flew in the direction pointed out by the Wild Dog, and Tang Zheng and Xiaobai talked in a low voice for a while. Xiaobai didn't know about the existence of the Suicide Valley, which meant that the Suicide Valley didn't exist since ancient times, but might have appeared after the royal family was destroyed. 81 Chinese Network. This was why this place did not exist in Little White's memories. But since the Wild Dog was so afraid, then the Suicide Valley was definitely not a good place. It was dangerous and unpredictable, so he should be more careful. As for the Wild Dog's intention, Tang Zheng wasn't worried. The Wild Dog was only in the Yuanying realm, so he wouldn't dare to play tricks in front of him. Otherwise, he would die without a doubt. Along the way, Tang Zheng had a clearer understanding of the situation in the sky beyond heaven, especially the things that happened in the past few hundred years. Back then, the Demon Clan and the Righteous Faction were expelled to the sky beyond heaven together, but they suffered all kinds of torture. After all, the Demon Clan and the Righteous Faction came from the same world. They even tried to form an alliance to fight against the enemy together, but later on, there were many internal conflicts and the alliance collapsed. After all, The two sides were sworn enemies who had fought for countless years. How could they really form an alliance in a short period of time? Moreover, there was no absolute powerhouse who could forcefully form an alliance between the two sides. In those years, the number of cultivators dropped sharply. Later on, someone calculated that it had dropped by more than half. Xianyin, you are really too ruthless. An expulsion plan killed so many people. Tang Zheng sighed. Back then, the sky beyond heaven hoped to use the killing of cultivators to plunder their energy and inject it into the sky beyond heaven to maintain the stability of the sky beyond heaven. During the war in the sky beyond heaven, this world was seriously affected and was on the verge of collapse. This was their repair plan. Now it seemed that it was successful. At least with Tang Zheng's perception, this world was very stable and wouldn't collapse. The longer he talked with the two, the more certain the wild dog was about his guess. These two were definitely not from this world, otherwise they wouldn't be so ignorant about this world. The somersault cloud wasn't too fast. After all, he was afraid of being discovered, so he tried his best to hide his whereabouts. The day receded, and the night fell. The blood moon hung high in the sky, dyeing the world with a faint layer of red. It was extremely strange. Since Wild Dog concluded that the two of them came from another world, he guessed that they definitely did not understand the darkness of the outland heavens. Like a guide, he volunteered to explain. It is said that the first batch of people who had just been expelled were shocked when they saw the blood moon, thinking that it was the end of the world. I was born in the realm beyond heaven, so I've seen the blood moon since I was young, so I'm used to it. The dark night of the sky beyond heaven is very dangerous, especially the Suicide Valley. We are almost there, so let's wait until dawn before we go in. Wild Dog pointed at a mountain range in front of them. This mountain range was actually floating in midair. There was no foundation below it, only clouds and mist. Because of the blood moon, everything appeared to be a strange red. Seeing Wild Dog pointing ahead, Tang Zheng narrowed his eyes slightly and stared at the mysterious mountain peak. The two mountains floated in midair, leaving a canyon between them. It was almost completely obscured by smoke. That's the Suicide Valley? Yes. The Suicide Valley is more dangerous at night than during the day. Let's enter the valley tomorrow. Tang Zheng pondered for a moment and said, the night is more dangerous than the day, which means that more things will appear at night. This means that we can have a deeper understanding of the Suicide Valley. Therefore, I think it's the best time to go in now. Wild Dog widened his eyes and swallowed his saliva. A thought came to his mind. This is really not afraid of death. It was not that Tang Zheng was not afraid of death, but he was confident in his own strength. Moreover, he was eager to know the situation of the Suicide Valley. Finding the opposition as soon as possible would be crucial to his next plan. Let's go. Tang Zheng did not give Wild Dog a chance to object. With an order, the somersault cloud quietly flew to the front of the valley and landed. Wild Dog's heart was in his throat. His eyes rolled around, afraid that there would be some danger. Xiaobai couldn't stand it anymore. He snorted and said, "What are you afraid of? The more afraid you are of death, the faster you will die. Besides, with me and Master here, you are still so afraid of death. Don't you not trust us?" Wild Dog hurriedly shook his head. "No, it's not that I don't trust you too. It's just that this place is too scary." Xiaobai snorted coldly and turned his head away, not looking at Wild Dog's frightened expression. In fact, Tang Zheng really wanted to fly directly into the heart of the Suicide Valley, but Wild Dog's performance made him feel that it was better to be careful. This Suicide Valley was a dangerous place, so he had to explore it step by step from the outside to the inside. He could attack if he wanted to, but he could also defend if he wanted to. That was the perfect strategy. The somersault cloud landed in the clouds, as if it had merged with the clouds in the outside world. When they jumped off the somersault cloud and landed on the ground, they couldn't see anything in front of them. They couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. "How did you see someone last time in such a thick fog?" Tang Zheng asked with a frown. Wild Dog smiled bitterly and said, "Last time I came in during the day. The fog during the day will dissipate a lot, so I can see a lot more clearly." Tang Zheng came to a realization and looked ahead. Since he couldn't see clearly, He could only explore step by step. He didn't let Wild Dog lead the way. After all, Wild Dog was too scared. His entire body was already tense, like a bow that was pulled into a full moon. Whitey volunteered and took the lead. They chose a direction and advanced in large strides. The surroundings were quiet and deathly still. It was as if there were no living things in this valley. There were many rotten leaves on the ground, and one after another, grotesquely shaped and extremely ugly towering trees pierced straight into the clouds. After walking for a while, Tang Zheng's only thought was that it was ugly. Every blade of grass, tree, and even rock here was much uglier than other places. Xiaobai couldn't help but tease, Wild Dog, you came to the right place. This is equivalent to you coming home. Wild Dog's face was filled with resentment. He couldn't even smile bitterly. The valley was very deep, and their speed was not slow. After walking for a while, Wild Dog said, last time I saw those people here, Tang Jing and Xiaobai stopped at the same time. Since they had appeared here before, this place had become dangerous. After all, they had to be careful. Rustle, rustle, rustle. They stepped on the leaves, making a slight sound. This sound was particularly obvious in the dark night, and even a little ear-piercing. Stop! Tang Zheng's ears pricked up, and he suddenly waved his hand and shouted. Xiaobai and Wild Dog stopped at the same time. Wild Dog panted and stared at everything in the darkness with his eyes wide open. He asked, what's wrong? Xiaobai also didn't understand and asked, Master, what did you find? The sound of our footsteps just now. There seems to be something wrong. Tang Zheng was very careful and found a clue. Footsteps? Chapter 1500. What was wrong with the footsteps? Tang Zheng pondered for a while and said with certainty, the footsteps just now were not only ours, but also others. What other people? Hearing this, Xiaobai and Wild Dog were shocked, but after carefully recalling, they did not find any clues. We have been discovered, Tang Zheng asserted. Then where is the enemy? Xiaobai and Wild Dog looked around and found no trace of other people at all. Except for a vast fog, there was nothing else. Tang Zheng did not find the enemy's whereabouts, indicating that the other party was so familiar with the Suicide Valley that he could easily hide from the eyes of the three people. Come out, hiding your head and sneaking around. What are you doing? Tang Zheng asked coldly. There was a dead silence, no answer. You don't want to come out, right? Then I'll force you out. Tang Zheng's thick eyebrows trembled, and the hidden sword in his hand lit up. Whoosh! A piercing sound suddenly sounded behind him. Whoosh! With a flash of sword light, he reversed in the air and slashed behind him. At the same time, he suddenly turned around and swept his torch-like eyes. There was still no figure, but the piercing sound came in front of him, just in time to be intercepted by the hidden sword. With a splash of sparks, it disappeared without a trace. The other party is hiding in the fog, Tang Zheng said sharply. Then I'll force him to show up. Xiaobai volunteered, flames rising in his hand. I'll do it, Tang Zheng said. Xiaobai's flames could not disperse the fog. Moreover, the fog was so thick that the sword light might not be able to completely shatter it. But he was not worried, because he had another magical ability, cloud travel and rain. This was the magical ability of the Dragon Clan, and this was the time to use it. Whoosh! A gust of wind rose from the ground, rolling up the fog and forming a cloud. The cloud and fog soared and flew into the air. A large space immediately opened up around them. Without the fog, they could clearly see things within a few meters. Tang Zheng did not stop. Instead, he continued to circulate his power. Immediately, the gale grew stronger, and the Suicide Valley gradually revealed its true appearance. Whoosh! Whoosh! A series of piercing sounds rang out unexpectedly. The other party had obviously realized that the situation had taken a turn for the worse, so they launched an attack without thinking. Moreover, this attack was extremely terrifying, capable of toppling mountains and overturning seas. The other party had obviously realized that there was no way to continue hiding, so they simply launched a fierce attack. Unfortunately, Tang Zheng had figured out a trick, and a lot of the fog had disappeared. He made a prompt decision to counterattack, and a dazzling sword light instantly enveloped an area with a radius of dozens of meters. Boom! With a muffled sound, a few figures fell out of the fog and lay on the ground not far away. Xiao Bai's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. With a point of his finger, a ball of flame burned around that person. The raging fire was like a cage that completely imprisoned the other party. There was no way for him to escape. The wild dog was dazzled. Tang Jing and Xiao Bai's cooperation was flawless. The opponent had no way to resist at all. Stand up. I'm very interested to see who you are. Tang Zheng stood outside the flames and stared at these people with a burning gaze. Several people stood up one after another. One of them was particularly eye-catching. Her long hair flowed down, and it was actually a girl. Her beautiful eyes were filled with disbelief. "How did you break my spell?" she asked, unwilling to give up. The fog was deliberately released by her to serve as a cover. More importantly, she was originally one with the fog, so she could hide in the fog. But when Tang Zheng was summoning clouds and rain, she felt as if her body was about to be torn apart, which forced her to show herself. With one strike, she didn't gain anything. Instead, she fell into the hands of the enemy. On the other hand, she was even more shocked. These people obviously didn't accidentally enter the Suicide Valley, but specifically came for the Suicide Valley. For so many years, no one had ever dared to do this. After all, the Suicide Valley represented death, and no one wanted to be associated with death. "You guys are good at hiding, but you can't escape my ears." Tang Zheng pointed at his ears and sneered. The other party sighed. She had indeed hidden herself very well. She was one with the fog and couldn't be distinguished from it. So much so that her name was named after the fog. However, the people around her didn't have her ability. Instead, they relied on her to use the fog as a cover and keep the enemy's pace in line so that they wouldn't be easily detected. However, Tang Zheng's senses were too sharp. Even so, it didn't escape his ears. "Since you've shown yourself, then take me to see your people." Tang Zheng glanced at the other party and confirmed that this girl was probably a key figure, so he directly said to her, "Aren't you afraid of death? This is the Suicide Valley." The fog asked suspiciously. This was very different from the people who had mistakenly entered this place in the past, causing her to be filled with curiosity. "All of you are alive and well here, which means that the Suicide Valley is not as dangerous as the rumors say," Tang Zheng said indifferently. "You'll regret it," the fog slyly said. "If you want to see the rest of us, then let me go." Tang Jing gave Xiao Bai a look. Xiao Bai understood and removed the flames, but a few small flames landed on their wrists, forming a bracelet made of intertwined flames. The few of them tried to resist, but it was useless. Instead, they screamed miserably and had no choice but to give up. Looking at their deflated expressions, Xiao Bai laughed complacently. "Don't even think about breaking free from my flames. If you dare to play any tricks, this small ball of flames will devour you. No one can save you." "You!" Bewildering Mist and the others grimaced, glaring at Whitey angrily. Xiao Bai was not afraid at all. Instead, he stared back. "Let's go." Tang Zheng pointed to the front and urged. The fog walked to the front. Wherever they passed, the fog automatically parted to the sides, no longer blocking the path ahead. This way, their speed was very fast. "Everyone, be careful," Tang Zheng whispered to Xiao Bai and the wild dog. Such a big battle just now must have alarmed the enemy, so they must have a sneak attack from the dark. The fog looked back 3 times with every step, as if trying to imprint Tang Zheng's appearance in her mind. Walala! A waterfall fell from the sky, flying straight down from a mountain stream. However, the water was as black as ink, exuding a dangerous aura. Unknowingly, they had walked into a graveyard. Numerous wordless tombstones stood quietly in rows and columns, as if they were silently saying something. When Xiao Bai saw these tombstones, his heart seemed to have been hit hard. His eyes became unpredictable. Tang Jing noticed his strange behavior and asked with concern, "Xiao Bai, what's wrong with you?" Xiao Bai shook his head slowly and said thoughtfully, "Master, these tombstones seem a bit strange. When I stepped into this place, I couldn't calm down. To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1501. Xiaobai could not calm down. What was so special about this graveyard? Tang Zheng thought hard, but in the end, he could not figure it out. One of them text Delta Network. Since he could not figure it out, he would just keep moving forward. When the time was right, the answer would come naturally. There were many tombstones, giving people a gloomy feeling. Not far away, there was a waterfall that was as dark as ink. That made people feel even more uneasy. Xiaobai could not hold back and asked impatiently, "Who are buried in these tombs?" The mist rolled her eyes at him. She did not expect him to ask this question, but she obviously did not want to answer him. Xiaobai's emotions became more and more difficult to calm down. It was as if these tombs had some mysterious power that kept stirring his heart. Whitey suddenly stopped in its tracks and stared straight at the fog, looking as if it would not stop until it got the answer out of him. "You have to tell me. Who are buried in these tombs?" Xiaobai's reaction was out of Tang Zheng's expectations. He knew Xiaobai very well. If there was no real problem, it would not be so stubborn. "Xiaobai, what's wrong?" Xiaobai shook his head silently. Tang Zheng turned to look at the mist and said sternly, "If you don't tell me, then I can't guarantee the safety of your companions." The threat in his words was self-evident. The mist's expression changed. She clenched her teeth and squeezed out two words from between her snow-white teeth. "Shameless." Tang Zheng smiled and said, "If you don't tell me the truth, I have something even more shameless." The mist huffed and puffed, obviously admitting defeat. She said helplessly, "These are warriors who died in battle many years ago." "Warriors? How many years is many years?" Tang Zheng asked. "Tens of thousands of years ago." "That long?" Tang Zheng exclaimed. The mist rolled her eyes at him and said, "The realm beyond heaven has a long history. Don't talk about tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years is not that long ago. There are also tombs of the imperial family from hundreds of thousands of years ago in the imperial city. This is not something that you outsiders can imagine." From her words, she was obviously very proud. She had already pointed out that Tang Zheng and the others were outsiders. This identity could not be clearer. It was almost impossible to figure it out. Tang Zheng didn't care about the contempt and provocation in her words. Instead, he and Xiaobai looked at each other and saw the deep meaning in each other's eyes. Xiaobai nodded gently in response to Tang Zheng's question. He meant that there was indeed a tomb of the imperial family in the imperial city. This was the content of his memory. However, he didn't expect that the current government would betray the royal family and leave behind the royal family's grave. Xiaobai thought that the royal tombs had been destroyed. He couldn't help but feel a little excited. Those buried in the imperial tombs were all his ancestors. Since they still existed, they had to be preserved in perfect condition. No one was allowed to destroy them. He couldn't wait to fly to the imperial city and pay respects to his ancestors. He suppressed his emotions and pointed at the nameless tombstone. He asked again, "You said that they were warriors. What heroic deeds did they do?" "They," the mist almost blurted out, but immediately became vigilant. She said, "This has nothing to do with you. Why are you asking so clearly?" These people were outsiders. Their motives were not pure. If she told them too much and they did something bad to the tombs, then she would be a sinner. Therefore, she kept her mouth shut and didn't reveal a single word. Seeing her reaction, Xiaobai said anxiously, "Who said it has nothing to do with me? I'm also Xiaobai." Tang Zheng shouted, cutting off Xiaobai's words. Xiaobai stopped abruptly. He suddenly realized the sensitivity of his identity and couldn't help but swallow the second half of his sentence. The mist coldly snorted and said, "You don't have anything to say? You want to lie to me? Do you think I'm that easy to fool?" Wild Dog didn't say a word. He looked deeply at Xiaobai. He seemed to be thinking about something, but cleverly didn't say a word. The group walked past the tombstones with different moods and arrived in front of the giant waterfall. Rumble. With a loud sound, the inky black water flowed down 3,000 feet. Looking up, the source of the waterfall seemed to reach the clouds, blending into the dark sky. "Where are your people?" Tang Zheng asked. "If you see them, don't regret it." The mist reminded him. "Don't waste time." "Of course I won't regret it." "Good. Then as you wish, the mist said. She looked at the waterfall and muttered a few words. Finally, she shouted, "Open!" Rumble, rumble, rumble. The mountains shook and the earth trembled as if there was an earthquake. What's going on? What's going on? Wild Dog looked around in panic and screamed. Tang Jing and Xiaobai were calm. The two of them tacitly looked at the waterfall. They saw that there was a huge opening in the cliff of the waterfall. The cliff was split into two, and the waterfall was also split in two. This scene is really shocking. Tang Zhang couldn't help but sigh. A huge gap appeared between the cliffs, like a door. Wild Dog finally stopped crying. He stared at the door in shock. No one would have thought that there was a world behind the waterfall. The mist glanced at them with satisfaction. She couldn't help but be disappointed. Besides Wild Dog, the other two didn't have much of a reaction. This scene didn't seem to shock them at all. No wonder you can hide so well. Normal people can't find the world behind the waterfall. Tang Zheng praised. Master, look at the water of the waterfall. Xiaobai pointed at the waterfall and exclaimed. Taking a closer look, the water of the waterfall turned from black to clear and transparent. There was no trace of its previous terrible appearance. All of this is your disguise. Even this suicide valley is your disguise. You deliberately made it into a dangerous place, right? Tang Zheng immediately thought of a possible situation. The mist looked at him in shock and asked in shock, "How do you know?" Sure enough, there must be some unknown secret. That's why the other side put in so much effort. If they knew this secret, then all the problems would be solved. Don't dawdle. Quickly take us to see your people. Tang Zheng didn't want to waste any more time. He was eager to know the answer, so he immediately urged. A cunning look flashed in Mist's eyes. She walked toward the door. It turned out that the river below the waterfall had automatically split in two, revealing the dry riverbed. Above it was a stone staircase. Climbing the stairs, they came to the door. Without hesitation, Mist and the others walked in. Tang Jing and the other two followed closely behind. Boom! With a muffled sound, the gap in the cliff closed and the door disappeared. The waterfall returned to its black color, and the group disappeared into the cliff. Hearing the movement behind him, he turned his head to take a look. When he saw that his retreat was completely blocked, his heart palpitated, but in the end, he endured it. The three of them were not ordinary people. This place might not be able to trap them. There was a faint light in all directions. Even without the use of fire, they could still vaguely see the surrounding scene. It was all bare stone walls. However, before they could move forward, the overwhelming darkness came unexpectedly. The light completely disappeared, and the darkness swallowed everyone. Even the light in their hands did not have much effect. Mist and the others had been wearing Xiaobai's flame rings on their wrists, like handcuffs. They were particularly conspicuous in the darkness. But at this moment, the flames were also swallowed by the darkness and disappeared. Xiaobai exclaimed, "The flames were swallowed. They are free." "They are free?" Tang Zheng also shouted. He was very clear about the power of Xiaobai's flames. But at this moment, they were able to escape so easily. This was enough to show that the situation had changed completely. Everyone, be careful. He only had time to remind them before the light was completely swallowed by the darkness. They fell into a state where they couldn't even see their own fingers. Ah! Wild Dog's scream suddenly sounded. He quickly flew into the distance and then stopped abruptly. "Let him go!" Tang Zheng shouted loudly, but to no avail. The wild dog disappeared without a trace, completely disappearing into the darkness. Chapter 1502. The people disappeared, and the wild dog was also swallowed up by the darkness, disappearing without a trace. 81 Ohms Chinese network. Tang Jing and Xiaobai looked at each other, shocked and angry. Xiaobai grinned and said angrily, "Master, I'll chase after them. Together. What if there's danger?" Xiaobai was worried. "If there's danger, I can't let you take the risk alone." Tang Zheng didn't listen and rushed into the darkness. Xiaobai had no choice but to follow like a shadow. A flame floated in front of the two, illuminating the path ahead. However, the flame seemed to be suppressed by the darkness and couldn't illuminate far. Step by step, there seemed to be no end. The world behind the waterfall was a completely different world, completely unfathomable. Puff. The flame flickered and was extinguished without warning. Master, be careful. Xiaobai shouted and hurriedly stood in front of Tang Zheng to protect him. With a boom, the flame rose from his body, illuminating the space a little. However, this time, the flame didn't burn fiercely. Instead, the darkness immediately counterattacked, trying to completely swallow the flame. The aggressiveness was very obvious. Not only that, Tang Zheng felt that he was in a strange realm. The darkness became sticky, like seawater, submerging his body and trying to swallow him. Xiaobai, don't fight back. Recalling the traces of the wild dog's disappearance, he had a thought and sent a message to Xiaobai. Xiaobai understood and hurriedly gave up resistance. The flame was completely extinguished. The great power of the darkness swallowed them in an instant. A mysterious force immediately enveloped them, and it had an extremely strong confinement effect. Tang Zheng understood in his heart that this point was definitely controlled by someone, which was why the darkness was so powerful, just like the fog from before. The other party hid so deeply. He tried his best, but even if he defeated the attack of the darkness, he might not be able to force the other party to show up. Instead of playing hide and seek like this, it was better to fulfill the other party's wish and push the boat with the current, so that they would show up on their own. Xiaobai believed that since they had a mysterious background, the other party would not immediately kill them. Instead, they would first imprison them and interrogate them. As a result, their lives were not in danger for the time being. Moreover, if their lives were truly in danger, they would be able to sense it. Naturally, they wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. They would strike back with lightning speed. Xiaobai was clever and intelligent. He understood Tang Zheng's gaze and words, so he chose to give up resisting. The darkness seemed to have a magical power, carrying the two of them forward quickly, the sound of the wind whistling in their ears. Light. A light appeared in front of them, growing brighter and brighter. Soon, a completely different scene appeared in front of them. It was a huge square with a tall altar in the middle. Around the square were rows upon rows of houses built against the mountains. It was a magnificent sight. However, there was one thing that was very strange. Those houses were much taller than the houses that Tang Zheng had seen before. One house was 5 to 6 meters tall, and the door was much bigger as well. It was as if it was built to facilitate some kind of entrance and exit. As his gaze swept past, he was quickly attracted by the flickering figures on the altar and around it. Those shadows were hidden in the darkness. Some were tall, and some were short. They were not uniform, but some of them were ridiculously tall, equivalent to 2 or 3 times the height of an ordinary person. It was very strange. The plan was a success. They have finally appeared. This should be their base camp, and from the looks of it, there are quite a few of them. Tang Zheng said in his heart as he swept his gaze around. Suddenly, his eyes turned cold. He saw a familiar figure, Wild Dog. He was hanging high on one side of the altar. The altar was 100 meters high. Wild Dog was hanging on the edge of the altar, standing in the air, swaying. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Wild Dog, you have come back to life in other places, so this time you better not die. Tang Zheng thought in his heart. Suddenly, he found himself flying in the air. This was the power of darkness. Xiaobai also flew to the altar. They were getting closer and closer to Wild Dog. Finally, a slight breathing sound came from Wild Dog's mouth and nose. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. Wild Dog was not dead. That was great. If Wild Dog was dead, he would feel guilty. After all, Wild Dog was counting on him to keep him safe. Now, what he needed to do was to break free from the shackles. He and Little White looked at each other, and their hearts were connected. Tang Zheng roared, and the hidden profound sword flew out from his body, and the dazzling sword light scattered in all directions. Puff, puff. The darkness was broken into pieces, and the power that imprisoned him was completely destroyed by the fierce sword chi that came out of his body. He was free. He floated in the air with his own strength. Xiaobai's counterattack was not slow at all. Flames came out of every pore of his body. Suddenly, he was surrounded by a sea of fire. He also broke free and regained his freedom. The speed of their counterattack and regaining their freedom was very unexpected. The opponents cried out in surprise and became restless. Roar! Suddenly, a strange sound came out of nowhere, and the cries of surprise disappeared immediately. The sound seemed to have magic, making them unable to think of resisting. "What's that sound?" Tang Jing asked. Xiaobai said thoughtfully, "It doesn't sound like a human." Xiaobai was not a human. Now that he had transformed into a human, he was very familiar with the sound. Obviously, it did not belong to a human. Not a human? Tang Zheng was shocked. He quickly looked at the source of the sound. It was from the altar. Without hesitation, he leaped into the air and saw the scene on the altar clearly. The altar was engraved with complicated patterns. It was very old, but there seemed to be a kind of life force in the silence. A figure shrouded in darkness stood on the altar. His back was completely swallowed by the darkness. His appearance could not be seen clearly, but one thing was certain. He was almost twice as tall as Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was 1.8 meters tall. The opponent was twice as tall as him. It showed how ridiculously tall he was. He was already beyond the range of a normal human. Could it be a giant? No wonder he built such a tall house. Tang Zheng secretly guessed. No matter what it is, let me see your face first." Tang Zheng moved. The hidden sword turned into a sword light. It was like a meteor from outer space. With a whoosh, it slashed at the opponent. Roar! Another deafening sound came out. It did not sound like a human's voice. Instead, it was filled with a rough and mysterious power. A wave came from the front. It happened to meet the hidden sword. The hidden sword trembled and immediately turned back. It was very strange. The hidden sword flew back to Tang Zheng's hand. The opponent's attack was not completely neutralized. A mighty sound wave immediately entered Tang Zheng's ears. His blood boiled and his eardrums felt like they were about to burst. Soundwave attack. Tang Zheng opened his eyes wide in surprise. It was the first time he had encountered a soundwave attack. Chapter 1503. The soundwave attack was invisible, and it was an all-around attack. It reached Tang Zheng and Xiaobai like a tidal wave. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Tang Zheng swung his sword 3 times in a row. The 3 moves of the Tai Chi dual swordplay were extremely powerful. They immediately blocked the soundwave attack, and it could not go any further. Roar! Kill! His opponent roared angrily. All of this seemed to have angered him. Tang Zheng narrowed his eyes slightly. His opponent was mysterious and unpredictable. He could only move forward and tear off his opponent's disguise. Only then could he come up with a better plan. So, he moved again. This time, he disappeared and merged with the hidden Xian sword. Man and sword as one. He did not hesitate to use this move because the current situation was not optimistic. So, he did not have time to wait and see. He might as well use his ultimate move. The hidden Xian sword's sacred inscriptions immediately shone. The 3 sacred inscriptions emitted a terrifying aura. Sacred inscriptions? His opponent roared again. He seemed to be surprised. Boom. This time, it was not a soundwave attack. His opponent moved. His huge body took a step forward and walked out of the darkness. Tang Zheng was shocked as he looked at the huge body that was revealed in disbelief. In fact, this could no longer be described as simply huge. It was simply a colossus the size of a small mountain. His opponent was not a human. It was a monster. To be more precise, it was a beast. Tang Zheng had never seen it before. It had long fangs and a huge mouth. The soundwave attack must have come from that mouth. No wonder it was so huge. It even took up half of its head. It stood on all 4s and had a long tail. Its body was like a hippopotamus. It was majestic and powerful. Its body was covered with scales. Tang Zheng quickly turned his head and looked at the tall and short figures below the altar. He realized that many of them had walked out of the darkness and revealed their true faces. His opponents were all different types of beasts. They were ferocious and powerful. He took a deep breath and quickly calmed down. Since Xiaobai and the Red Lunar Beast were in the realm beyond heaven, It was not surprising that there were other types of beasts. Of course, these beasts were more powerful than many of the beasts in the human world. He could tell from their aura. Roar, roar, roar. A series of deafening roars resounded. The altar seemed to tremble a few times. The surrounding walls also trembled as if they were about to collapse. The momentum was exceptionally great. Seeing this scene, Tang Zheng understood that this suicide valley was indeed worthy of its reputation. Just these guys alone were not something that ordinary people could handle. There was no turning back. Tang Jing and the sword of Xinzong had become one. Once the sword was out, it would be hard to pull it back. Whoosh! The hidden mystic sword was right in front of his opponent. His opponent opened his huge mouth, but no sound came out. However, a terrifying power surged out from his mouth. All of this did not mean that there was no sound. It was just that the human ear could not distinguish the frequency of this sound. This was an ultrasonic attack, and its power was even stronger than before. The hidden mystic sword suddenly slowed down as it was blocked by the supersonic waves. The sword light soared into the sky and illuminated this huge space, dispelling the darkness and exposing everything. The wild dog was in a daze. When he saw this scene with his half-closed eyes, he was shocked. His heart almost jumped out of his chest. Xiaobai did not let Tang Zheng take the risk alone. With a roar, his body underwent an earth-shattering change. He returned to his true form and became a huge monster. Furthermore, it was getting bigger and bigger, as if there was no end to it. He was much bigger than he had ever been before. His fiery red hair was like a raging flame. The flames under his feet turned into a wheel of fire, constantly rotating. The horn on his head flickered with a dazzling red light. He was awe-inspiring and exuded an unparalleled and terrifying aura. "Master, let me help you," Xiaobai roared. The fire wheel accelerated, and his huge body flew towards his opponent. This scene stunned everyone. Pairs of eyes widened to the extreme as they stared at Xiaobai with bright eyes. There were too many complicated emotions that were difficult to describe. Fog was particularly small among these huge monsters. She opened her small cherry mouth and her white cheeks turned red. She could not help but breathe quickly. She swallowed a few mouthfuls of saliva before squeezing out 2 words from the depths of her throat: miracle. After that, she found it hard to speak again. The other people's reactions were not much different. They watched this scene as if their souls had left their bodies. Their eyes followed Xiaobai closely. There were too many indescribable and inexplicable emotions in their eyes. Xiaobai did not notice any of this. There was only one thing in his eyes. No one could hurt his master unless they stepped over his dead body. He was doing what he had done before as usual. The power of the hidden mystic sword and Tang Jing increased to the extreme. Although the supersonic attack temporarily restrained the hidden mystic sword, the sword light of the hidden mystic sword quickly overflowed. Soon, it formed a huge sword. This huge sword had several colors intertwined on it: black, gold, purple, and blue. The 4 colors intertwined and looked very mysterious. The hidden mystic sword turned into a colorful sword. Its speed suddenly increased, and its momentum was completely different. The supersonic attack could no longer resist. Puff! The hidden mystic sword penetrated the supersonic attack and shot into that huge mouth. Xiaobai's attack was like a shadow. He opened his mouth and continuously spouted flames. The flames were huge, as if the clouds in the sky had been ignited. They quickly landed on the huge body of the opponent. Boom! The flames burned fiercely. However, there was a pair of small eyes shining in the flames. It stared at Xiaobai without blinking. The eyes were like the others, containing too many indescribable things. "Don't attack the ancestor. Ancestor, be careful." A heart-wrenching cry immediately came from below. It hit the altar like waves. The altar shook as if it would collapse at any time. Ancestor? So this huge monster was called the Ancestor. This thought flashed through Xiaobai's mind, but he did not show any mercy. Instead, he was a bit proud. "Who told you to attack the master? This is what you get." Whoosh! The fog soared into the sky, turning into a ball of fog that wrapped around the Ancestor. Even the flames were wrapped in it. Crackling sounds rang out, but the fog did not retreat at all. At this moment, she was the fog, and the fog was her. She was using her life to protect the ancestor. Night, what are you waiting for? Quickly save the ancestor. The fog's anxious voice rang out. The surrounding darkness immediately surged toward the ancestor. This space immediately turned dark. It was as if the light had been switched on and was completely extinguished. No, the light was swallowed by the darkness, just like before. However, there was an exception. Xiao Bai's flames were still burning. Although they were affected by the fog and the dark night and were much dimmer, they were still burning nonstop. It was as if they wanted to burn everything into ashes. Chapter 1504. The night was filled with darkness, but Xiao Bai's light was like the sun at dawn. It seemed weak, but it was actually full of vitality. Xiao Bai bared his teeth. Flames also rose from his body. He turned into a huge fireball, roaring towards the sky. Boom! The flames filled the sky. There was no darkness that could stop it. A scream came out from the darkness. With an unstoppable force, the darkness quickly retreated. Screams immediately sounded out. So. A figure flew towards Xiao Bai, holding the determination to die, incomparably sorrowful. Stop! Don't hurt the ancestor. A desolate yet dignified voice rang out. It actually came from the gigantic creature that was completely enveloped in flames. The ancestor finally spoke, but it was actually to stop the attack of his own people. This greatly exceeded Xiao Bai's expectations. He did not know what the other party was planning. Although he did not understand the ancestor's intention, but all the attacks disappeared in an instant. Everyone retreated like a tide. Dong, dong, dong. Suddenly, the sound of people kneeling on the ground was deafening. One by one, everyone knelt on the ground, kowtowing to the ancestor, begging, "Ancestor, fight back. Don't let them hurt you." The ancestor did not answer. Instead, he ordered the fog. "Fog, back off. You are not their opponent." "No, ancestor." The fog refused with a choked voice. "Are you not going to listen to my orders?" The fog hesitated, jealously and unwillingly said, "Yes, ancestor." The fog dissipated, retreated to the edge of the altar, and returned to its original appearance. It could not bear to, but also unwillingly looked at the ancestor. Xiao Bai was also surprised by the ancestor's reaction. Shouldn't they be thinking of ways to kill them? Why did the ancestor not allow them to make a move despite mobilizing so many people? Could it be that the ancestor had masochistic tendencies? Xiao Bai's imagination ran wild. Suddenly, he saw a ray of light fly out from the huge mouth, passing through the raging flames, and stopped beside Xiao Bai. Hidden Profound Sword. This was actually the hidden profound sword that turned into a colorful sword. Xiao Bai was just about to ask what happened to the hidden Xian sword, when the hidden Xian sword shone brightly, and a human figure gradually appeared from the sword light. The man and the sword parted ways. Tang Zheng walked out of the sword again and stared at the ancestor with bright eyes. Xiao Bai looked at him in surprise and impatiently asked, "Master, what's wrong?" According to Xiao Bai's judgment and experience, Tang Zheng did not really hurt the patriarch in the end. He probably stopped at the last moment. This was completely out of Xiao Bai's expectations. According to his judgment, Tang Zheng could definitely gain something and hurt the great ancestor, but he didn't do so. Therefore, this was the strange part. "Xiao Bai, just stop." Tang Zheng was serious in speech and manner. His cold eyes seemed to be deep in thought. Just now, at the last moment, the ancestor's actions had completely moved him. The ancestor actually didn't fight with them, but instead allowed them to display their divine might. There must be a secret that no one knew. Tang Zheng didn't want to regret it in the future. At the most critical moment, he stopped Xiao Bai from attacking further. Xiao Bai didn't understand why, but he still quickly stopped. The flames were extinguished in an instant, just like when flames soared into the sky. They came and went quickly. The ancestor was completely exposed. After the flames were extinguished, the ancestor's body was emitting black smoke, and there were burn marks on his body. In this way, the ancestor seemed to be in a particularly sorry state. He lost a part of his prestige and looked more pitiful. Xiaobai looked at Tang Zheng suspiciously and asked, "Master, why did you stop? Why did you ask me to stop?" What he meant was, why didn't they quickly take down the ancestor in one go? After all, if they worked together, the ancestor might not be their match. It was very likely that he would be killed in one blow. Wasn't this their goal? Tang Zheng's expression was solemn. He shook his head thoughtfully and said, "Xiaobai, haven't you seen any clues? The ancestor doesn't want to fight with you. What's the point of dealing with someone who would rather die than fight back?" "You don't want to fight with me?" Xiaobai's mind was full of question marks. Why? Tang Zheng also wanted to ask why. Just now, he and the mysterious hidden sword became one, but his perception of the outside world didn't weaken at all. Instead, it became sharper. When he flew into the ancestor's huge mouth, he saw hope. It seemed that he could kill the other party immediately. However, Xiaobai caught up. When Xiaobai revealed his true body and used flames, he turned the place into a sea of flames. The other's expressions changed. This wasn't unusual. After all, the strength that Xiaobai displayed was too shocking. However, the ancestor's reaction was greatly beyond Tang Zheng's expectations, and he couldn't see through it at all. The ancestor would rather die than make a move. There was definitely something fishy about this. He even guessed a little. Xiaobai was a member of the royal family of the heavens beyond heaven. Could it be that he revealed his true body and used his unique divine ability, so the ancestor recognized him? Was the ancestor related to the royal family? Perhaps it was just like the Scarlet Lunar Beast. However, didn't the Scarlet Lunar Beast swear that the royal family members were all sacrificed? How could there be survivors? He couldn't figure it out at the moment. This was a serious matter, so he didn't continue to attack and take the ancestor's life. Tang Zheng stared at the ancestor and said, "I want to ask him the same question too." "Ancestor, since we've stopped, why don't we talk about it?" The ancestor's small eyes shone with wisdom. He didn't want to look away from Xiaobai. He said excitedly, "Let me ask you a question first." "I'm the one who asked you first," Xiaobai said unhappily. The ancestor said carefully, "This is a serious matter. It involves many people and many things. I have to ask you first." Xiaobai wanted to say something, but he was stopped by Tang Zheng. "Then go ahead and ask." Xiaobai pouted unwillingly as she spoke, as if she had been greatly wronged. "Are you from another world?" the ancestor asked. The mist frowned in confusion. "Isn't it obvious? These people are outsiders from another world. Is there a need to ask so cautiously?" Tang Zheng understood the meaning behind the ancestor's words. The ancestor didn't mean that they were with the righteous faction in the Devil Clan. Instead, he was confirming Xiaobai's identity. "Of course," Xiaobai answered without hesitation. The patriarch's expression immediately became excited, as if his thoughts had been verified. He then asked, "Your roots are actually in the sky beyond heaven? Are your ancestors from the heavens beyond heaven too?" Xiaobai looked at him strangely. He understood something and asked curiously, "How did you know?" In other words, he admitted the ancestor's question. "Sure enough, I've said that I'm old and blind. It's been tens of thousands of years, but I still can't forget this scene. Back then, the late emperor used this kind of magical power to fight against strong enemies and became a wise emperor." The ancestor was so excited that he almost spoke incoherently. His whole body trembled as he approached Xiaobai step by step. His mountain-like body caused the altar to tremble violently. Tang Zheng's heart trembled. His guess was confirmed. This ancestor had an unusual relationship with the royal family. He was most likely an old subordinate of the royal family. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1506. The Great Ancestor quickly approached Xiaobai. Xiaobai stared at the Great Ancestor. He was not an idiot. Like Tang Zheng, he had already guessed some clues. He was faintly looking forward to it, and his eyes were shining. After all, he returned to the realm beyond heaven to find his roots and everything about his past. The Great Ancestor's performance indicated that he would achieve part of his goal. At least, The great ancestor seemed to have a good understanding of the imperial family. Mi Wu and the others looked like they were possessed. They looked at the great ancestor in disbelief, then looked at Xiao Bai. They felt like they were dreaming. Mi Wu and the others had heard too many stories about the imperial family. They were so used to it that calluses almost formed on their ears. According to the great ancestor's description, the imperial family was so powerful that no one could compare to them. The whole world submitted to them, and they were like gods. The truth was so. In the original realm beyond heaven, the imperial family were gods. The imperial family's orders were oracles, and no one dared to disobey. In other words, no one dared to disobey. Mi Wu was only surprised by Xiao Bai's extraordinary attack power. She was deeply shocked, especially by Xiao Bai's real body, which shocked them even more. They did not think about the imperial family at all. After all, that was a distant legend. How could they link the two together? At that moment, Mi Wu seemed to understand why the great ancestor's reaction was so abnormal. She was so excited that her throat moved. Her hands trembled involuntarily, and her eyelids twitched. Silence fell. Everyone's eyes quietly fell on Xiao Bai and the great ancestor. They were excited and looked forward to what would happen next. Boom! The great ancestor stopped in front of Xiao Bai. The altar shook violently, but it held on and was not destroyed. Xiao Bai's body was slightly inferior to the great ancestor's, but his aura was not weaker than the great ancestor's. On the contrary, the great ancestor had lowered his aura to dust. Their eyes met. Xiao Bai was the first to ask excitedly, "You know about the imperial family?" Of course. 2 drops of sparkling and translucent tears fell from those small eyes. The ancestor emotionally said, "Not only do I know about the imperial family, I've even seen the imperial family. However, that was tens of thousands of years ago." You've seen the royal family? Does that mean you've lived for tens of thousands of years? What is your relationship with the royal family? Xiao Bai asked directly. I've lived an ignoble life for tens of thousands of years. I thought I was too ashamed to meet the late emperor. I've let down his trust, and I've let down the title of protector. Who would have thought that the late emperor would pity me and let me see the imperial family again? The grand ancestor's eyes were already brimming with tears. He looked at Tang Zheng with excitement, longing, awe, and many other emotions. The royal family. Cries of surprise rang out from all around, and their breathing involuntarily quickened. Just now, some people had already thought of some clues, but when they heard these 2 words with their own ears, they were still deeply shocked. Whoosh! Whoosh! Immediately, all eyes were firmly focused on Xiao Bai. Even Wild Dog's eyes could not hide the shock in them, but there was also a hint of realization. He finally understood why the officials would mobilize so many people, changing their usual behavior and using such a thunderous method to deal with the righteous faction. It turned out that their target was not the righteous faction, but Xiao Bai in front of him. He was a member of the imperial family, so the officials had such a big lineup. As for the history of the heavens beyond heaven, the righteous faction had been here for 400 years and more or less knew a little. The current officials were not orthodox, but had seized the former imperial family's country and throne, and then proclaimed themselves emperor. The name was not legitimate, and the words were not smooth. Although tens of thousands of years had passed, and many people had even forgotten that history, but after all, there was a dark history, and it was not honorable. Wild Dog became excited, but his heart could not help but feel uneasy. He did not know if he was lucky or unlucky to be involved with the former imperial family. He was afraid that he would become the target of the current officials. Xiao Bai had already determined that the ancestor was inextricably linked to his own race. Seeing him in tears, he quickly stretched out his front paw and placed it on the ancestor's head. Boom! The ancestor was very excited. His huge body was completely sprawled on the altar, prostrating in front of Xiao Bai, just like how the red lunar beast prostrated in front of Xiao Bai. You've worked hard. Xiao Bai held it in for a long time, and then said this sentence sincerely, full of emotions. Just this sentence made the ancestor feel that these tens of thousands of years of waiting were worth it. He was speechless and stammered, I'm sorry, Your Majesty." With the word, Your Majesty, The ancestor had completely acknowledged Xiao Bai's identity and position. He was a surviving member of the imperial family, which meant that he was a prince. The previous emperor was no longer around, so he was naturally the rightful emperor. When the fog heard the word, Your Majesty, her whole body trembled, as if her soul was about to leave her body, but she immediately woke up as if she had just woken up from a dream. With a thump, she knelt on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Following that, the sound of people kneeling on the ground could be heard one after another. At a glance, everyone was kneeling. Those huge beings were kneeling on the ground, and all of them were deliberately suppressing their auras to the lowest point as they kowtowed to Xiao Bai. A wave of darkness retreated, and a young man appeared, kneeling side by side with the fog. This was the night. As far as the eye could see, there were many black figures. Xiao Bai had 1,000 words to say, but they were stuck in his chest, and he could not say a single word. Although he had experienced something similar to what the red lunar beast did to him, it was a world of difference. After all, there was only one of them at that time, and this time, there was a black mass. There was no way to compare their auras. Xiao Bai, Tang Zheng softly called out to him, and only then did Xiao Bai wake up. His spirit was lifted, and he suppressed the complicated emotions in his heart and said, Get up. The great ancestor raised his head and looked at Xiao Bai, but he did not get up. The others did not dare to get up either. Xiao Bai's body flashed with a red light, and he turned into his human form. He used both of his hands to support the great ancestor's upper body, and with a sudden burst of strength, the great ancestor could no longer stand and stood up straight. Your Majesty, I am ashamed. Don't say such things. Xiao Bai advised, let bygones be bygones. After so many years, I am already very surprised to see the people from back then. I am not surprised at all, because I firmly believe that the imperial family will return, and your Majesty will return victorious. It's just that I never thought that I would be able to see this day. I thought that I would never be able to see it again. The great ancestor said, Just now, you called yourself a protector. Are you one of the protectors from back then? Xiao Bai's heart skipped a beat, and he asked. In Xiao Bai's memory, there were 2 protectors under the imperial family, and they were like the prime minister in the human world. They were the highest officials under the emperor, and they had great power. The great ancestor nodded heavily. Yes, I was the right protector from back then. However, I failed to live up to the name of protector, and I did not protect the imperial family well. Furthermore, the word protector has been deeply tarnished by that person. To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1507. The word protector has been deeply tarnished by that person. The great ancestor sounded extremely serious when he said that. He was suppressing his anger and hatred, and anyone could tell what he was implying. Tang Jing and Xiao Bai fell into deep thought at the same time. Who exactly is that person? When the great ancestor saw their puzzled looks, he knew that they did not know much about what happened back then. In actual fact, the great ancestor had always kept that part of history a secret. Although he often mentioned the imperial family to Mi Wu and the others, he never told them the most important thing. Now that he met Xiao Bai, there was no need for the great ancestor to keep it a secret anymore. Mi Wu and the others looked at the great ancestor curiously. They had heard about some related things, but they only knew half of it. In actual fact, they were curious too, but since the great ancestor did not want to tell them, they could only keep their curiosity to themselves. Your Majesty, it looks like you don't know much about what happened back then. I'll tell you exactly what happened back then so that you'll know how despicable and shameless that person is, the great ancestor said with righteous indignation. His small eyes shone brightly. Xiao Bai nodded and said with a sullen face, All right, we're all ears. The great ancestor's face darkened. He lifted his head slightly, and his eyes became much more profound as he recalled the past. After a while, he took a deep breath and said slowly, Although what happened back then was very long ago, I won't forget it for the rest of my life. I'm remembering history, and I'm also remembering some people's dirty tricks. Everyone's attention was attracted at the same time. They widened their eyes and stared at the ancestor. Back then, The realm beyond heaven was governed by the late emperor. The weather was good, and people lived and worked in peace. However, the conspiracy grew quietly in the dark. Nobody noticed anything because we didn't expect that person to commit such a heinous crime. That person was only second to one person in the realm beyond heaven. He was extremely powerful, and he was brewing a huge conspiracy to seize the world. That person was a despicable traitor, and he was the left guardian who tarnished the name of the protector. Tens of thousands of years have passed, but I'm still unwilling to mention that filthy name. Left guardian? Xiaobai exclaimed in surprise. The memories he inherited only contained the local customs of the realm beyond heaven and the general situation. He didn't know much about the realm beyond heaven. Therefore, when he heard this secret, he was also very shocked. Xiaobai wasn't the only one who was shocked. The others also came to a sudden realization. So this was the reason why the ancestor didn't want to mention the name of the protector. He was the right protector, and the traitor was the left protector. They were both highly regarded by the late emperor. The left guardian had betrayed the late emperor. As the right guardian, the ancestor seemed to have felt the same way. He felt the same betrayal. Immediately, the mist and the others were filled with righteous indignation. They scolded the left protector for being shameless and despicable. They accused him of his shameless actions. Tang Zheng seemed to be deep in thought. He looked at Xiaobai, then at the ancestor and said, "Ancestor, what happened back then is already in the past. Let bygones be bygones. Since Xiaobai is back, let's start anew. Those traitors will receive their due punishment." Due punishment? Ha ha ha. The old man laughed. There was an indescribable sense of desolation in his laughter. Tang Jing suddenly frowned and asked curiously, "Ancestor, why are you laughing? What is the due punishment you were talking about?" The ancestor asked. "Of course, it's to make them pay a heavy price. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth." Tang Jing answered firmly. The ancestor shook his head and said in disappointment, "No, no price can make up for this regret, because that person is already dead." Dead? Tang Zheng opened his eyes wide in surprise and stared at the ancestor. How could he be dead? After all, the ancestor was still alive. That traitor didn't have to worry about food and clothing. He sat on the world. How could he be dead? This didn't make sense. The ancestor looked at Tang Zheng with shining eyes. He already understood his thoughts. Yes, this traitor deserved to die, but he died so inexplicably. This caused us to be unable to kill this traitor. So, there is no way to truly take revenge. The ancestor said regretfully. Tang Jing also understood the ancestor's thoughts. His so-called revenge was to kill the traitor with his own hands, not just the traitor's descendant. There was indeed no way to truly take revenge. There was no way to completely resolve this hatred. Tang Jing asked curiously, "How did he die?" The ancestor laughed sorrowfully and said, "Perhaps the heavens were not willing to let this traitor live for a few more years. He died more than 1,000 years after stealing the country." Only 1,000 years? Tang Zheng was shocked. After all, in the long river of history, 1,000 years was nothing. These powerhouses had a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. How could they only live for such a short time? The ancestor understood Tang Zheng's shock very well and nodded. That year, when I heard this news, I was also very shocked. At one time, I thought that he deliberately released fake news in order to lure our opposition forces to attack the imperial city. After all, after that person died, the imperial city's strength was greatly weakened. The ancestor recalled bits and pieces of that year. They were vivid in his mind, as if they had happened yesterday. However, later on, it turned out that we were all wrong. During this period, there were indeed opposition forces who took the opportunity to attack, but in the end, it ended in failure. That traitor never came back to life, nor did he reveal his tracks. The ones who defeated the opposition forces were his descendants. Who would have thought that the traitor's descendants would be so powerful? Tens of thousands of years have passed, but I have never heard of that person. So, I am very sure that he did die back then. The saying, "The wicked will be punished by the heavens." This sentence is really correct. Tang Zheng sighed regretfully. For those who had experienced the events of that year, It was indeed a great pity that they could not kill the traitor with their own hands. Xiaobai clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked and turned white. He took a deep breath and suppressed his anger with great difficulty, saying, "Although that traitor is dead, I don't mind finding his descendants to take revenge. This generation will settle the grudges of the previous generation." This was Xiaobai's fate. From the moment he came to this world, this was a fate that he could not escape. He also did not want to escape. The ancestor's eyes flashed and said, "Your Majesty has great ambitions. If the late emperor knew, he would definitely be content. However, that traitor's descendant, the one who lives in the imperial city today, is very powerful. He is not any weaker than that traitor back then." Before the ancestor finished speaking, everyone already understood the meaning behind his words. This was a thorny matter. To read a novel without mistakes, please visit Chapter 1508. Even so, the great ancestor's confidence did not diminish. He stared at Xiaobai and said, "Now that His Majesty has returned, no matter how powerful that traitor's descendant is, he won't be His Majesty's match. It's time for us to counterattack." Tang Zheng was not as optimistic as him and said worriedly, "Even so, we must investigate the enemy's situation before we dare to take action. Before that, it's best not to act rashly to avoid alerting the enemy." The great ancestor obviously did not think so and retorted, "What are you saying? His Majesty has returned, and no one can be his match. Why should we be afraid? This is not the imperial family's style." Tang Zheng bitterly smiled and said, "Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. If we act rashly and something goes wrong, won't it hurt those close to us and delight the enemy?" The great ancestor's face sank and said, "Are you doubting His Majesty's ability?" "Of course not." Tang Zheng said helplessly, "Great ancestor, don't make things difficult for Master. I think what he said is reasonable." Xiaobai noticed that the atmosphere was a little strange and quickly spoke up for Tang Zheng. "Master? How can you call him Master? His Majesty is a member of the imperial family. The imperial family will not respect anyone as their master. Only others will bow down to the imperial family," the great ancestor said emotionally. He looked at Tang Zheng with a somewhat unfriendly gaze. Tang Zheng was not surprised and had already expected this scene. After all, she was also like this. He said with familiarity, "Great ancestor, my relationship with Xiaobai is not something that can be explained in a few words. It's also not something that you can deny with a few words." Before he could finish speaking, the ancestor had already impatiently raised his head high, looking down at Tang Zheng like a tiger eyeing its prey, his pair of small eyes brimming with killing intent. "His Majesty is a member of the imperial family. The dignity of the imperial family cannot be challenged. If you dare to talk nonsense or think nonsense, then don't blame me for being impolite," the great ancestor said sternly. His posture was not fake at all, as if he would attack at any time. Tang Zheng smiled bitterly and had no choice but to shut his mouth. Xiaobai couldn't bear to watch any longer. He solemnly looked at the ancestor and said, "Ancestor, although you are an old official of the imperial family, there is something I must say first. He is my master. I will not allow anyone to provoke him or disrespect him. His words are my words. If you respect me as your Majesty, then you must also respect my master." Xiaobai's eyes were firm and unquestionable. Even when he met the ancestor's eyes, he did not retreat. The two pairs of eyes looked at each other, their eyes reflecting each other's figures. The ancestor knew the royal family very well. Once the royal family made a decision, even 10 horses could not pull them back. Moreover, the two sides had just met, so there was naturally a difference in their relationship. The elder ancestor believed that in time, His Majesty would believe his words. Being close to virtuous ministers and distancing themselves from petty people was what the royal family should do. He fiercely glared at Tang Zheng, as if to say, "Kid, just you wait. One day, His Majesty will understand my painstaking efforts. At that time, your good days will come to an end." Tang Zheng, of course, understood the elder ancestor's eyes, but he didn't care. After all, The elder ancestor was also thinking for Xiao Bai. The two were different paths to the same goal. Once he understood this point, then all the problems would be solved. Yes, Your Majesty. The elder ancestor lowered his head to Xiao Bai and resentfully replied. Xiao Bai nodded with satisfaction and said, "That's more like it." But the fog and the others looked at Tang Zheng with a rather playful gaze. In fact, there was not a trace of kindness in their eyes. The tense situation was resolved, and both sides became amiable. They were invited to a relatively luxurious large house. This house built on the mountain was far more spacious and bright than it looked from the outside. Xiao Bai was warmly invited to this house. Xiao Bai and Wild Dog enjoyed the same treatment and entered the house with Xiao Bai. Wild Dog felt that he had lived his life in vain. He had never encountered something so exciting and full of ups and downs. This time was different. At this moment, he was completely immersed in it and relaxed to the extreme. Because he knew that if he followed Xiao Bai, then there was no need to worry about his safety. The others surrounded the house from afar. Only the fog and dark night followed the elder ancestor into the house. What surprised Tang Zheng the most was that after the elder ancestor entered the house, he only shrunk his body slightly and didn't transform into a human form. In fact, if he transformed into a human, it would be more convenient for him to move, and it wouldn't take up so much space. Xiao Bai and Tang Zheng were almost telepathically connected. They had the same idea. He asked curiously, "Elder ancestor, why don't you transform into a human? It would be more convenient for you to move." Alas, a long sigh sounded from the elder ancestor's mouth. The fog and dark night's eyes dimmed at the same time. Tang Jing and Xiao Bai noticed each other's abnormality. They couldn't help but feel their hearts hanging in the air. They pricked up their ears to listen to the elder ancestor's answer. "It's not that I don't want to transform into a human, but that I can't." The elder ancestor revealed the mystery in one sentence. "You can't? How can that be?" With the elder ancestor's strength and cultivation, it wasn't difficult for him to transform into a human. After all, his strength was much stronger than the fog and dark night. "Your Majesty, this is the problem we are facing now. Not only me, but other than the fog and dark night, the others can't transform into a human." Hiss. Tang Zheng sucked in a breath of cold air, his gaze landing on the fog and black night. Just what was going on? Why was their situation so bad? Just what was going on? Without Xiao Bai asking, the elder ancestor had already explained. The opposition's fighting strength was deteriorating. This was a subtle change. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but the fog and dark night were much less affected, so they could still transform into humans. Tang Jing thought hard, then a thought flashed through his mind. He pointed at his feet and said, "Could it be a problem with this piece of land? After all, isn't this place called Suicide Valley? This name isn't for nothing, right? There must be a reason." After the battle and careful observation, Tang Zheng could already conclude that just these people alone were not enough to make the outside world so fearful of this place. They even gave it the title of Suicide Valley. That could only mean that this land originally contained some kind of great danger, which was why it made people tremble and fear. The elder ancestor looked at Tang Zheng in surprise, as if he didn't expect him to tell the truth with a single sentence, as if he understood the Suicide Valley very well. The old ancestor nodded seriously and said, "You guessed right. It is indeed the influence of the Suicide Valley. The Suicide Valley is restricting our abilities bit by bit, causing us to degenerate. If this goes on for a long time, we will die even before the enemy attacks us. But you are still weak and can't fight against the traitors. Therefore, you have no choice but to borrow the power of the Suicide Valley and hide here for the time being," Tang Zheng said bluntly. Hearing this, the ancestor and the others lowered their heads at the same time, unable to hide their shame. Tang Zheng's head trembled. His words were too abrupt. He immediately changed his words and asked the ancestor, "Ancestor, what exactly is the danger of this Suicide Valley? When we came in just now, what we encountered didn't seem to be too dangerous." The previous danger was almost all caused by the fog. They really didn't have much experience with the dangers of the Suicide Valley itself. For the latest novel updates, please visit the website. Chapter 1509. What danger was there in the Suicide Valley? When the ancestor heard this, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Fear appeared between the brows of the fog and the dark night. The danger of the Suicide Valley is definitely not something that can be explained in a few words. This must start from the origin of the Suicide Valley. The ancestor said slowly. Xiaobai nodded and said, "That's right. Why is there no information about the Suicide Valley in my memories?" The ancestor said, "Your Majesty, what you have inherited is the memories of the royal family. You only have information about the past of the heavens beyond heaven, and the Suicide Valley did not exist since ancient times. It was only formed after the betrayal of that traitor." How did it form? Xiaobai asked curiously. Why did the Suicide Valley become a place of great danger? That's because this land has been corroded by poisonous substances. Every blade of grass, every tree, every piece of soil, and every rock is highly poisonous. Highly poisonous? Tang Jing and Xiaobai both shivered at the same time. Their eyes narrowed as they stared at the hard rock beneath their feet. Could it be that the rock beneath their feet also contained poison? But why were they safe and sound? The ancestor looked deeply at the two of them and guessed what they were thinking. However, he was not in a hurry to explain. Instead, he said step by step, all of this is the traitor's scheme. Back then, he relied on his own strength and those vicious subordinates of his. It was impossible for him to be a match for the late emperor. However, he was too cunning, and the late emperor trusted him so much that he fell into his trap. What trap? This was about the history of the royal family. Xiaobai was completely interested. The traitor lied that according to ancient legends, there was a peerless divine weapon hidden under this land. Moreover, it was rumored that this divine weapon was related to the safety of the country. In order to stabilize the country and protect the people of the world, the late emperor led most of his men into this mountain range in an attempt to find the divine weapon. However, no one expected that this was completely the traitor's scheme. This mountain range had long been poisoned, and everyone was infected with the poison. Most of them directly died, and even if they didn't die, after experiencing an endless battle with the enemy, they were all killed and injured. Hiss. After hearing that, Tang Zheng, Xiaobai, and even the wild dog felt a chill in their hearts at the same time. They looked around, as if they had traveled through tens of thousands of years of history and witnessed the bloody battle. Even though they had only heard a few words, they could still feel the tragedy at that time. I stayed in the imperial city to deal with government affairs and escaped a calamity. I didn't fulfill my duty as a subject and allowed that traitor to take advantage of me. The old ancestor said regretfully. Even the late emperor didn't see through his scheme, and he didn't survive either. If you go, I'm afraid that the traitor will catch all of you in one fell swoop. Today, I won't be able to hear these secrets of the past. Xiaobai comforted. The old ancestor's eyes lit up as he felt slightly comforted. Your Majesty, you're wrong about one thing. How could the late emperor be killed so easily? Although the traitor had exhausted all means, the former emperor still managed to successfully leave this place and return to the imperial city. It's just that he was already heavily injured. Xiaobai was shocked. He didn't expect his father to be so powerful. Under the traitor's meticulous scheme, he was still able to escape. The late emperor originally had a chance to recover, but the traitor was too cunning. He immediately sent a group of extremely vicious people to attack the imperial city. In order to protect his subordinates, His Majesty fought to his last breath and saved many of his subordinates, including the empress and the child in her womb. Xiaobai became emotional. It turned out that his father had used his own life in exchange for his own. He couldn't understand his father's feelings at that time, but he must have been extremely sad and disappointed. After all, he had been betrayed by the person he trusted the most. His father's country had also been lost in his hands. Xiaobai clenched his teeth. A ball of flame emerged from his palm and kept rolling. This was a flame of anger, as if it could devour everything. You must have seen the cemetery on your way here. Those are the warriors who followed His Majesty here and fought to their last breaths. Tang Zheng and Little White were suddenly enlightened. Previously, they were still curious about who was buried in the tombs. and the fog kept saying that they were warriors. It turned out that they were all people who were loyal to the imperial family. They were buried here for the imperial family. I will not forget them. In the future, the imperial family will also not forget them, Xiao Bai said with a heavy tone. The old ancestor looked at Xiao Bai with gratification and gratitude. He said emotionally, if they knew of His Majesty's intentions in the underworld, they would have died without regrets. For a moment, the atmosphere became heavy and oppressive. Xiao Bai took a deep breath and broke the silence. He said, Old ancestor, what happened after that? Since this land had already been corroded by poison, why did you come here? Weren't you worried? After the late emperor covered for us to escape, he had no fixed residence and was immediately divided into two factions. Some suggested that we immediately counterattack, while others suggested that we hide, accumulate strength, and plan slowly. I was in the latter faction, while the general was in the first faction. The general? Yes, the general's cultivation was powerful, and he came from the oldest family in the realm beyond heaven, the Red Moon clan. Wait. Before the old ancestor could finish, Tang Zheng quickly raised his hand and interrupted him. Old ancestor, the Red Moon clan that you mentioned, are you talking about the Red Moon beast? The old ancestor looked at Tang Zheng in shock. He did not expect that an outsider like him would mention the Red Moon beast. After all, it had been tens of thousands of years. Most people in the realm beyond heaven had forgotten about the existence of the Red Moon beast. How do you know? The old ancestor stared at Tang Zheng and asked, Not only do I know, but I have also seen the members of the Red Moon clan. In fact, there is more than one of them. Tang Zheng said in a deep voice. What? The old ancestor stood up and looked down at Tang Zheng. His eyes were wide open as he asked in disbelief, How could you possibly have seen a member of the Scarlet Moon clan? Didn't they all sacrifice themselves? Master is not the only one who has seen them. I have seen them too. Xiao Bai interrupted. You have seen the king as well? Where? The old ancestor was even more shocked. In another world. Perhaps, the general that you mentioned is the one that we have seen. Tang Zheng was deep in his thoughts. The Red Moon beast's identity was not simple. Back then, he came to the human world to look for the queen and the prince. Due to the time and space turbulence, he was separated from his wife. He was sealed forever while his wife fell into Xian Yin's hands. Master, you tell us. Xiao Bai took the initiative to let Tang Zheng speak so that the others would listen to him. Tang Zheng took the hint and began to talk about how he met the Scarlet Moon beast. Naturally, he also mentioned Xian Yin, causing everyone to perk up their ears and listen with great interest. Chapter 15:10. After Tang Zheng finished speaking, there was complete silence. Everyone was reminiscing about the soul-stirring and scheming struggles of the human world. Although only a few words had described the tip of the iceberg, it still made people feel the magnificence and ruthlessness of it. The patriarch heaved a long sigh. That traitor even sent people to another world. In order to stabilize his rule, he really did everything he could. If it weren't for his willful rebellion back then, the realm beyond heaven wouldn't be in such a precarious situation. Since the Red Moon General is not dead, then everything will be easy. Our strength will become stronger. The great ancestor was full of beautiful expectations for the future. Tang Zheng did not feel optimistic. The Red Moon General's strength was greatly reduced when he traveled through space. It will take some time to recover his former strength. The great ancestor did not care at all. I believe the Red Moon General will be able to do it. Tang Zheng helplessly bitterly smiled and bitterly shut his mouth. Fortunately, the queen's decision was wise. She let me and the Red Moon General each lead a group of subordinates to prepare for both sides. One group followed the general's advice and directly confronted the traitor. The other group led by me went into hiding. Moreover, in order to ensure the safety of both sides are not allowed to contact each other. Otherwise, the enemy would have been powerful, and we would have been wiped out by them. The great ancestor sighed. So it was the queen's idea. Tang Zheng suddenly realized that the queen's decision was wise. Xiao Bai's father and the queen were not ordinary people. Their foresight was so accurate. You still haven't told us how you can hide in this place that is eroded by poison? Tang Jing asked the key question. Xiaobai also looked at the great ancestor with a curious look. The great ancestor continued, we chose to hide in many places, but we did not find the best place to hide. Later, I missed the warriors who died here and came here to pay respects. However, I accidentally found something strange. What's strange? The periphery of this place is highly poisonous. However, once you step into the core area, the poison disappeared as if it was dissolved by some mysterious force. Since the war, this place has changed a lot. It is impossible to fly above the mountain range, so if you want to reach the core area, you have to pass through the ground. With my insignificant abilities, I reached the hinterland with difficulty and entered the core of the battle. I saw the brutality of the battle that day. Corpses were everywhere, and countless former comrades were lying in pools of blood, turning into cold, hard corpses. The great ancestor's eyes involuntarily turned red as if there were tears in them. It was as if he saw the original scene. The grief and shock in his heart could be imagined. Tang Zheng understood the ancestor's feelings very well, but he still had a belly full of questions that had yet to be answered. For example, what dissolved the poison? Since there was poison outside, why were they not affected when they came in? Why couldn't they fly in this mountain range and could only enter on foot? At the same time, Tang Zheng was also glad that he chose to enter on the ground instead of flying in the air. Otherwise, if he fell into a place filled with poison, he would have died before he could even see the ancestor. Tang Zheng simply threw these questions to the ancestor. The ancestor looked deeply at Tang Zheng, unable to hide his admiration. He thought to himself that this person's vision was unique. His thoughts were meticulous, and he was not simple at all. The ancestor did not hide anything and explained again. In the eyes of the traitor, this place had already become the Suicide Valley. Moreover, the traitor had killed so many of his former comrades in the trenches. This was his stain, and he did not want to come to this place again. In fact, he did not want anyone else to come to this place either. Then this place would become a place forgotten by the world, a natural shelter. The ancestor and the others gathered everyone's strength and finally managed to pass through the outer poison grounds with great difficulty. They arrived at the hinterland and settled down there. They were self-sufficient and must have lived in seclusion for tens of thousands of years. Unless they occasionally sent spies out to gather information, under normal circumstances, they would never leave the Suicide Valley. After so many years, the outside world did not discover that the opposition was actually in the Suicide Valley. As for the rumors of the opposition, the ancestor had purposely let his subordinates spread them out. This was to increase the fear of the traitors and create psychological pressure on them. The ancestor did not wish to see the traitors sit peacefully and enjoy the world. The rumors of the opposition had indeed caused quite a bit of trouble for the enemy. However, they could not find any traces of the opposition even after digging 3 feet into the ground. The more this situation was, the more they felt tormented. This was the effect that the ancestor wanted. He believed that as long as he did not reveal anything, the enemy would definitely not be able to guess where they were hiding. It was a complete accident that the wild dog found out that the opposition was hiding in the Suicide Valley. This kind of situation had never happened before. After all these years of analysis and research, the ancestor already had some insights into why the Suicide Valley would automatically dissolve the poison. He remembered the rumors about the divine armament back then. This matter was not groundless. That was why the traitor was able to deceive the late emperor. Otherwise, with the late emperor's intelligence and wisdom, it would be impossible for him to fabricate a lie out of thin air to successfully deceive him. The changes in the Suicide Valley might be inextricably linked to the mysterious divine armament. In addition, the things that happened in the past few years also confirmed the ancestor's guess. That was, there were more and more places in the Suicide Valley that had been dissolved by the poison, and the area that could be inhabited was expanding bit by bit. Now, only the outermost area was still poisonous. The fog could transform into fog, and the night could transform into darkness. They could effectively avoid the effects of the poison. Therefore, They had been taking turns to monitor the situation outside the suicide valley. Not a single movement could escape their eyes. All of this should be the effect of the divine armament. In the long run, all the poison will be dissolved, and we will be in danger of being exposed. In addition, our strength is deteriorating, and it might be related to the divine armament. I have been thinking of a solution recently. The crux of all this is the divine armament. If we can find the divine armament, perhaps all of this can be solved. The ancestor said in distress. All of this came down to the divine armament. Tang Zheng had already come into contact with many divine armament. His heart skipped a beat. Could he find this divine armament? Chapter 15:11. Seeing that everyone's eyes were focused on him, Tang Jing thought for a while, and then said without giving in, I don't have full confidence in finding this divine armament, but I can give it a try. Will it really succeed? The ancestor asked nervously and expectantly. Xiaobai said without hesitation, of course, Master is very resourceful. Not to mention finding a divine armament, he can do even more difficult things. In Xiaobai's eyes, Tang Zheng was practically synonymous with omnipotence. Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard this. He better not let down Xiaobai's trust, otherwise, he would really make a fool of himself at that time. The ancestor and the others were clearly skeptical. Moreover, there were a lot of doubts. Unknowingly, the sky was getting brighter. The suicide valley woke up from its slumber and gradually regained its vitality. Since they were looking for the divine armament, they had to have a comprehensive and detailed understanding of the suicide valley. Thus, the group left the waterfall and walked back to the bottom of the sky. The waterfall was right behind them. The waterfall was still black, and under the illumination of the morning sun, it gave off a different kind of radiance. What's going on with this waterfall? Why is it black? Tang Zheng asked curiously. The ancestor glanced at the waterfall and said, this waterfall was contaminated by poison back then and has always contained a highly toxic poison. If you drink a little, you will die on the spot. This waterfall is equivalent to our last line of defense. If we have no other choice and are discovered by the enemy, it will be very difficult for the enemy to break through this waterfall if we can't avoid it. But if that's the case, it will become a situation of certain death. There will be no way out. If the enemy continues to surround us, we will easily be trapped to death. Tang Zheng spoke bluntly, pointing out the shortcomings in an instant. The ancestor blushed and said resentfully, we know this as well. This is our last resort. Tang Zheng immediately realized that he was being too abrupt and said embarrassedly, Ancestor, I was just saying it casually. Don't mind it. The ancestor rolled his eyes and said, do you think I would be so petty? The fog also chimed in, the ancestor is magnanimous. Why would he care about these few words? That's true. Tang Zheng echoed with a smile. The ancestor really didn't care. He continued to answer Tang Zheng's question and said, when the waterfall was opened last night, you must have seen the changes in the waterfall. When the waterfall is divided into two, the black water will become incomparably clear. This is the only time when the waterfall is not poisonous. How can a waterfall not be poisonous? This time, Xiaobai couldn't help but ask in surprise. One moment it was highly toxic, the next it wasn't. It was indeed confusing. Xiaobai nodded and said, I haven't figured it out yet. Only when the waterfall is opened will it be poisonous. Then why did you think of opening the waterfall? Miwu said worshipfully, this is all thanks to the ancestor. When we first arrived here, we didn't have a place to stay. It was the ancestor who suddenly thought of something and used his divine ability to open this waterfall. That's how we were able to live here and shelter ourselves from the wind and rain. Patriarch, you're truly amazing. Xiaobai praised. Looking at Xiaobai's sincere eyes, the elder ancestor's face turned even redder. He said embarrassedly, Your Majesty is too kind. Actually, there is something I haven't told everyone. What is it? It's very absurd to say, but it wasn't my sudden idea. Instead, I had a dream. There was a voice in the dream, and that voice told me how to open the waterfall. The elder ancestor's words were earth-shattering, causing everyone to be shocked. It was actually a dream that told him the method. Dreaming was very normal, but the key was that the dream came true, which was very unusual. Miwu could hear the sound of his heart breaking. This wasn't the elder ancestor's credit, but that dream's credit. In order to maintain this group, the elder ancestor had to make everyone trust his strength. That was why he didn't dare to say it directly. Otherwise, if others questioned his strength, this group would easily fall apart. Now that His Majesty had returned, this problem no longer existed. That was why he could say it so calmly. A dream, Tang Zheng muttered to himself. His eyes couldn't help but fall on the waterfall. Every time the waterfall is opened, the water from the waterfall that isn't poisonous is available for us to drink. This ensures our survival. The elder ancestor continued to talk non-stop. Later on, I tried to recall this dream, but I could only remember that voice and not anything else. I've studied the waterfall for countless years, but I still can't figure it out. I don't know where that voice came from. Moreover, since then, I've never had a similar dream again, and I've never heard that voice again. This is really strange. Xiaobai nodded. He looked at Tang Zheng and said, Master, did you find anything? Tang Zheng shook his head and said, Since we found something suspicious, then let's start from the waterfall. Everyone suspects that the antidote to the poison is that divine weapon. When this waterfall is opened, it can automatically purify the poison. It is very likely that it is inextricably linked to that divine weapon. So, it is most suitable to start from the waterfall. Miwu rolled his eyes and said, You said that you will start from the waterfall, but do you think you will have any results? The elder ancestor has studied it for many years without any results. Don't think that with just a few words and a silver tongue, you will have any results. Miwu had always been prejudiced against Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng ignored her ridicule and said indifferently, Whether or not there will be any results, we will only know after we try. Then we will see you try. Tang Zheng was also eager to try. Let's try. Who's afraid of who? Retreating in the face of difficulties is not my Tang Zheng's style. He walked straight to the waterfall. There was a deep pool under the waterfall. It was like a big bottle of ink, incomparably dark. He walked around the deep pool. The waterfall did not have any strange smell. Other than the color, it was no different from ordinary water. He reached his hand into the water. Miwu exclaimed, Are you trying to commit suicide? That water is highly poisonous. Tang Zheng smiled without turning his head and said, Of course I know. He had encountered many kinds of water. The water of the river Styx in the ghost realm and the water of the sea of bitterness. He had turned the danger into safety every time. Moreover, water was the source of life. It could reflect many things. His hand stopped a few millimeters away from the surface of the water, and a strange feeling immediately spread to his palm. Poison. He immediately determined. This poison was really strong. Before he even came into contact with it, he actually had a reaction. He did not retract his hand. This bit of poison could not hurt him. He turned around and looked at other places. This was the hinterland of the Suicide Valley. The other places had been purified and did not have any poison. Only this waterfall still had poison. This was especially different. If you can't see it, then stop pretending. If it was that simple, why would you wait so many years? Miwu said jokingly, attacking Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng smiled slightly and did not care. Miwu, the elder ancestor shouted. Miwu curled his lips and finally did not dare to do it again. Chapter 1512. Plop. A splash appeared in the deep pool. Everyone stared at the splash with their mouths agape. Exclamations rang out. No one had expected this. Tang Zheng had actually jumped into the deep pool. One had to know that the water was highly poisonous and was extremely harmful to people. Even if one's strength was profound, it would still affect them to a certain extent. Xiaobai was also shocked by this unexpected scene. He hurriedly rushed to the edge of the pool, as if he wanted to jump in as well. Your Majesty, you mustn't. The ancestor quickly stopped Xiaobai. He was incomparably anxious. Your Majesty, this deep pool contains highly toxic poison. You mustn't be rash. But Master has already jumped in. If I don't go down and investigate, how can I be at ease? If anything happens to him, then I can't be by his side to protect him. I can't absolve myself from the blame, Xiao Bai said with grief. Although the ancestor had already expected Xiao Bai's loyalty to Tang Jing, he was still deeply shocked when he heard his words. This loyalty far exceeded his expectations. As a high and mighty and incomparably proud member of the royal family, shouldn't he ask others to express their loyalty to him? How could he be so loyal to others? The ancestor's worldview was almost overturned. Since Tang Jing was temporarily not here, the ancestor felt that as an old official, whether it was for the sake of the royal family or the late emperor, he had the obligation and responsibility to remind His Majesty of this point. The royal family's dignity was inviolable. Your Majesty, you mustn't. You're a member of the royal family. You're His Majesty. How can you put yourself in danger? The ancestor persuaded earnestly. Before he could finish, Xiao Bai had already rudely interrupted his words. Ancestor, you don't have to say any more. He's my master. For him, I'm willing to sacrifice my life. How can I stop at a mere deep pool? Xiao Bai cleverly went past the ancestor and tried to jump into the deep pool. How could the ancestor ignore him? He hooked his claws and stopped him. When the fog and the night saw this, they hugged Xiao Bai at the same time. At this moment of life and death, the two of them could not care less about the crime of offending their superiors. Xiao Bai was restrained and roared angrily, "Let go of me! Your Majesty, we are all thinking for you." The three of them said earnestly, "I can be responsible for my own decisions. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Besides, don't you all respect me as His Majesty? How dare you disobey my orders?" Xiao Bai was flustered and exasperated. He never thought that they would try so hard to stop him. Wasn't this preventing him from being loyal to his master? This was framing him for being heartless and unjust. Xiao Bai was an indomitable spirit. How could he be a heartless and unjust rascal? The two sides were in a stalemate. One side was trying hard to jump into the deep pool, while the other side was desperately holding on to him. The wild dog witnessed this scene with his mouth agape. His worldview was deeply subverted. He could not help but have thousands of words to say in his heart. What did that Tang Jing do to make His Majesty so loyal to him? Was there some kind of drug? The wild dog's imagination ran wild. He did not know how this farce would end. Your Majesty, if you jump into the deep pool, we'll jump in with you. Anyway, if something happens to Your Majesty, we won't be able to live in this world anymore. In the end, the ancestor had no choice but to use a trump card: coercion and bribery. Little White immediately gave up struggling. It looked at the patriarch with reddened eyes, and its eyes involuntarily turned red. He could understand the ancestor's motives and thoughts, but the ancestor could not know his true thoughts and his unusual feelings for Tang Jing. That was why all these differences were caused. Boom! A loud noise came from the deep pool, interrupting this scene. They all turned their heads to look at the deep pool, their eyes firmly attracted. Gurgle! The deep pool began to boil like boiling water. Dense black gas spiraled up into the sky like smoke from a kitchen chimney. It had a unique charm. What had happened in the deep pool? How could there be such a change? Countless questions popped up in everyone's mind, especially the ancestor. He had observed the deep pool for tens of thousands of years and had never seen such a strange scene. How could Tang Jing do it? No one knew the danger Tang Jing had experienced. He was almost walking along the gates of hell. If he was careless, he would definitely die. Just now, he took the risk to jump into the deep pool. It was not on a whim. He was definitely not seeking his own death. When he placed his hand on the surface of the pool, he not only felt the strong poison, but also a trace of the special characteristics of the pool water. Different types of water had similar special characteristics, and this pool water was no exception. It had many of the special characteristics of water. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be helpless. But Tang Jing was different. He cultivated the dragon god art and had truly transformed into a dragon. He had a true dragon avatar, so his understanding of water was far superior to ordinary people. After all, the dragon clan was able to control the clouds and rain, and they liked to live in the water. They were very sensitive to water. He took full advantage of this advantage. His divine sense entered the water and spread along the water droplets, quickly spreading deeper into the deep pool. His divine sense spread deeper and deeper. Fortunately, his divine sense was strong enough, and because he was a dragon, he had a natural affinity with water. His ability to control water was very strong, so his divine sense could reach a depth that others could not reach. This deep pool was really bottomless, as if there was no end. It made people feel a sense of loss. Was there any meaning in doing this? Fortunately, he was confident in his own judgment, which was why he persevered and continued to explore. Suddenly, bang! A mysterious force rebounded from the deep pool and fiercely hit his divine sense. It was as if his divine sense had encountered a spring and was quickly bounced away. Tang Zheng did not give up. Instead, his eyes lit up as if he had discovered a new continent. If there was no reaction, he might have given up. But since there was a mysterious force rebounding his divine sense, it meant that there was something strange in this deep pool. But divine sense was divine sense after all, and could not replace a real person to explore. Moreover, once his divine sense entered the deep pool, it would be rebounded by the mysterious force. There was no way to go any further, and there was no way to obtain more information. In this way, no matter how he tried, there would not be much effect. Therefore, he decided to take the risk and jump into the deep pool himself. He would personally go to the bottom of the pool to explore. Maybe the divine weapon would be at the bottom. Of course, he was not completely reckless and did not care about his own life. He had other considerations. He was already a member of the Dragon Clan, and his ability to control water was absolutely first class. The pool water was highly toxic, but he could completely use the Dragon Clan's magical power to completely resist the corrosion of the pool water and isolate the toxicity, so he would not be hurt. Chapter 15:13. When Tang Zheng entered the water, the surrounding poison quickly gathered in his body, trying to erode every cell and nerve in his body. X8, however, Tang Zheng hurriedly activated the Dragon God technique. A bubble immediately appeared around him, firmly enveloping him and isolating him from all the poisonous water. Tang Zheng was slightly stunned. When he was in the South Sea, although he was like a fish in water, there was no such bubble. Could it be that this kind of change occurred after the Dragon God technique was promoted to a certain realm? He did not guess wrongly. This was the miraculous change that would occur after the Dragon God technique reached a certain realm. When he sensed the surrounding poison, the water avoidance pearl automatically produced, isolating all the threats around him, allowing him to be safe and sound. The others were not dragons, so of course they could not do all this. Even a powerhouse like the Ancestor could not do anything. A pleasant surprise. Tang Zheng was relieved and quickly dived down. The pressure of the water did not cause him any trouble at all. He dove down like a fish in water. From the outside, the pool did not look deep, but once he went down, he could not see the bottom. Tang Zheng's speed was extremely fast. After diving for a long time, he still did not reach the bottom. He was not worried. After all, he had probed with his divine sense before and knew the general situation. Moreover, his divine sense was not idle now and had already probed down. Bang! Suddenly, his divine sense was bounced back. He was overjoyed. He had reached his destination. A faint light came from below. He could not help but squint his eyes slightly. Before he could stand firm, this light flew towards him with a whoosh. It was very sharp, causing people to involuntarily feel a chill in their hearts. He did not panic and quickly stabilized his mind. A golden light flew out from his palm and hit the light fiercely. Unexpectedly, the energy contained in this light was extremely domineering. Boom! With a loud sound, a surging wave of water tilted out from the point of impact. In the blink of an eye, the wave rushed to the surface of the water and splashed up huge waves. This movement was very loud and immediately attracted the attention of others. They all turned their heads to look over. Xiao Bai anxiously cried out, "Master!" After a slight pause, he shouted again, I'm going to save Master. Old Rint hurriedly gave a look to the fog and dark night. The three of them held on to Xiaobai tightly, not giving him a chance to break free. Your Majesty, you can't do that. The ancestor begged with tears in his eyes. The situation in the deep pool was unclear, and they didn't know the dangers. How could they let Xiaobai go down without doing anything? If anything happened to him, they would not be able to redeem themselves even if they died 10,000 times. Xiaobai struggled in despair. His eyes were filled with despair, but he knew very well that he really couldn't save anyone. He thought to himself, Master, you've always been able to turn danger into safety. I hope you can create a miracle this time as well. Yes, Master will definitely succeed. Tang Zheng's situation was indeed very dangerous. As for whether he could turn the situation around, it was still unknown. The wave from before had completely disappeared, and before he could take another look, an even more powerful surge of energy surged towards him. He hurriedly circulated his energy to resist, but at this moment, the force had completely enveloped him. Gotcha! The water avoidance pearl had actually shattered. This scene was unexpected. His mind went blank for a moment, and then he knew that this meant that there was a huge danger. He wanted to activate the Dragon God mantra and create a new water avoidance pearl, but it was already too late. Thus, he could only fight back. Puff! The light that contained surging power had already completely enveloped him. His body felt as if it had been slashed by a sharp blade. A wound appeared on the surface of his skin, but no blood flowed out. Tang Zheng cultivated the chaotic Vajra spell and had an indestructible body. It was almost impossible for him to get external injuries, but this time, he was indeed injured. Although there was no bleeding, only a wound was left on his body. This was no longer a normal situation. He was obviously stunned for a moment. He understood that he had underestimated the other party. His nerves were greatly stimulated, and all his hair stood on end. The poison in the water was like a cat that smelled blood. It found a breakthrough and crazily surged towards the wound. The poison immediately seeped into his body from the wound. This poison was indeed extraordinary. No wonder it was able to defeat the imperial family back then. Tang Zheng felt that his brain seemed to have slowed down a little. It was just the beginning, yet there was already such a huge reaction. It was almost unimaginable. He stabilized his mind and circulated the chaotic Vajra spell. His entire body glowed with a golden light, and the wound quickly healed, preventing the poison from further harming his body. Immediately after, the strange feeling in his brain was dispelled, and he quickly returned to his peak state. Swish! Sword light. The hidden profound sword in his hand released a huge amount of power, and the sword light slashed towards the ball of light. Before the hidden profound sword could hit, its speed had actually slowed down a little. This was because the surrounding water had become countless times thicker, like cement, showing signs of rapidly solidifying. Then, how powerful was the hidden profound sword? Sword light surged. Bang, bang, bang. The surrounding water was stirred up into pieces and returned to its original state. The hidden profound sword broke free from its restraints and quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately struck the center of the ball of light. Clang! The sound of metal clashing suddenly rang out. It was deafening, comparable to a thunderclap. A powerful shockwave quickly spread out from the point of impact. He had no choice but to quickly retreat towards the surface of the water. He had no way to stabilize his body. It could be seen how terrifying the shockwave was. Hua! He splashed out the water and rushed into the air before stopping. He looked down at the deep pool from above. It was so small, but it actually had such a huge impact on him. It was truly unexpected. When the others saw him splash out the water, they were shocked. Xiao Bai could not hide his excitement and blurted out, "Master!" Tang Zheng's gaze fell on Xiao Bai. He understood the anxiety in his eyes and comforted him. "Xiao Bai, don't worry." Xiao Bai nodded his head heavily and said ecstatically, "I knew Master would be safe and sound." The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth squeezed out a bitter smile. He was not really safe and sound. He was even injured by the light just now. The ancestor was already dumbstruck as he muttered to himself, "Impossible! Impossible. How could he be safe and sound? It was not that no one had ever thought of going to the bottom of the water to investigate, but not long after entering the water, they were poisoned and lost their lives. The ancestor had once used his divine sense to enter the water to investigate, but his divine sense was not as strong as Tang Zheng's because Tang Zheng cultivated the Ksiddhagarbha Sutra, which was a divine ability that specialized in cultivating the soul and divine sense. Therefore, his soul and divine sense were much stronger than many experts. The ancestor's divine sense was not able to investigate the ball of light, but Tang Zheng did. It was precisely because of these factors that the ancestor and the others were so shocked. This was truly a slap in the face. Tang Zheng alone was able to defeat the ancestor and the others. Chapter 15:14. Other than Xiaobai, everyone else was exclaiming in their hearts that it was impossible, but the truth was right in front of them. There was no way to deny it. Splash. Another sound of water splashing rang out, interrupting their thoughts. A ball of light flew up from the water, heading straight for Tang Zheng. Swoosh, swoosh. The sword light suddenly appeared and hit the other party, the intense light even eclipsing the sunlight in the sky. Hiss. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. Previously, no one had seen the battle clearly, but now that they saw it with their own eyes and experienced it for themselves, they all felt their hearts tighten. This seemingly simple attack contained a terrifying power that was too frightening. Only now did they truly experience Tang Zheng's astonishing strength. The great ancestor had already fought with Tang Zheng, so he knew very well how powerful he was. But he stared without blinking, wanting to know more about Tang Zheng. In addition, he wanted to know more about that ball of light, the thing that he had always ignored. He couldn't help but feel ashamed, asking himself, why did he overlook such an obvious thing in the past? Moreover, it was right in front of him. He was almost certain that the ball of light was definitely related to the divine weapon. Since that was the case, then he couldn't let it escape. Where do you think you're going? The great ancestor roared, letting go of Xiaobai, and flew towards the ball of light. Whoosh! A sharp gust of wind blew, and the great ancestor's huge body pounced towards the ball of light. The ball of light was extremely sensitive and immediately reacted, understanding that it was in danger. The ball of light turned around and flew towards the deep pool. Xiaobai's eyes widened, and he shouted, "Don't run!" The ball of light ran even faster, and in the blink of an eye, it was on the surface of the water, and in the next second, it would fall into the water. Once it entered the water, it wouldn't be so easy to deal with. Tang Zheng knew this very well, so he instantly became one with the sword. His figure disappeared, becoming one with the hidden, mysterious sword. The ball of light was fast, but the hidden, mysterious sword was even faster. The moment the ball of light entered the water, the hidden, mysterious sword finally caught up with it. Clang! Another heavy blow, and a huge whirlpool immediately appeared on the surface of the water, the whirlpool spinning counterclockwise. The ball of light, however, did not delay in the slightest. It swayed and fell into the water, its light dimming a little. Tang Zheng's figure reappeared, holding the dark concealment sword in his hand. He stood in the air, unwillingly looking at the ball of light disappearing into the water. The patriarch missed and looked at the water surface in disappointment. Tang Zheng glared at him in annoyance. If he hadn't been so rash, he wouldn't have scared off the ball of light. The ball of light clearly had its own consciousness. This divine weapon could very well be a divine weapon. Only a divine weapon would have a weapon spirit and consciousness. The old ancestor felt uncomfortable under Tang Zheng's stare and resentfully turned his head to the side. When the others saw this, they couldn't defend the old ancestor, because this was indeed his responsibility. What do we do now? The ancestor asked in embarrassment. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and said, "It played hide and seek with me, but it found the wrong target. Since it wants to play underwater, then I'll play with it to the end." The ancestor's eyes lit up, and he no longer doubted what he said. Tang Zheng indeed had the strength to say such words. Xiaobai finally took the opportunity to break free and shouted, "Master, I'll help you." The old ancestor's face suddenly changed. These words made his heart hang in suspense. He was afraid that if Tang Zheng agreed, then Xiaobai would be in a dangerous situation. Tang Zheng could go into the water, but that didn't mean that Xiaobai could too. It was indeed so. Tang Zheng was very clear that he could come and go freely in the water, relying on his dragon body. Xiaobai was good at controlling fire. After entering the water, it would not be good for him. If something happened to him, then it would be too late for him to regret. Thus, he waved his hand and said, "You stay here and watch for me. Watch me go down and pull it out." When the ancestor heard this, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He gasped for air. Immediately, he felt that Tang Zheng seemed to be more pleasing to the eye. Xiaobai was helpless and looked at Tang Zheng with pleading eyes. Tang Zheng was indifferent. He looked deeply at Xiaobai and rushed into the water without hesitation. The others' hearts were in suspense. They stretched their necks and looked at the deep pool. Tang Zheng dived into the depths and immediately saw the ball of light not far away. The ball of light also noticed him and seemed to be very vigilant. It didn't immediately attack. The two sides were getting closer and closer. The ball of light seemed to have confirmed that it was Tang Zheng. As soon as he entered the water, the ball of light immediately released a dazzling light and flew straight towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng shivered, understanding what this meant. He raised the hidden profound sword. The sword light was like a blazing sun, attacking the ball of light. Clang, clang, clang. A series of collisions sounded incessantly. Pillars of water shot up into the sky from the water. The deep pool seemed to have turned into a fountain. Everyone was shocked by the pillars of water. Their expressions changed, and even their breathing became hurried. The battle under the water was so intense. No one knew how the battle would turn out. Both sides had already exchanged dozens of blows, but they were actually evenly matched. Tang Zheng was obviously at a disadvantage. He was unable to use the water avoidance pearl. His body was in close contact with the poisonous water. The poisonous water's effect on him was getting stronger and stronger. "I can't go on like this. Otherwise, I will die in the hands of the other party," he thought silently in his heart. In a hurry, he came up with a plan. With a shake of his body, a huge change happened to his body. He released a golden light that filled the bottom of the deep pool. A huge dragon's might spread from the bottom of the pool. Not long after, it completely surged out from the water. The old ancestor and the others had never seen a dragon before. Naturally, they had never felt the dragon's might. It was the first time in their lives that they felt the dragon's might. Everyone's heart seemed to stop. This dragon's might was far superior to Tang Zheng's aura. It gave people a feeling that they could not match up to it. The old ancestor's face was pale. He thought that it was released by the ball of light. He subconsciously thought that Tang Zheng was in danger. He swallowed his saliva and said with difficulty, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid he's in danger." Xiaobai rolled his eyes. How could he not understand the old ancestor's thoughts? He said disapprovingly, "You guessed wrong. This is Master's aura and not that ball of light." What? His aura? Why did he change so much in the blink of an eye? The old ancestor was so shocked that he almost doubted his life. He had never seen or heard of such a change. Xiaobai did not explain further. After all, the matter of the dragon race was a secret. If he could not disclose it to the public, then he would try his best not to. Tang Zheng had truly transformed into a dragon. His huge body almost occupied all the space at the bottom of the pool. He also blocked the escape route of the ball of light. At the same time, the water level of the deep pool rose by a large amount. After transforming, Tang Zheng clearly felt that his perception of water had become more sensitive. Moreover, the poison that originally posed a great threat to him had actually lost its effect. Yes, the dragon race had a natural affinity with water. Without the protection of the water avoidance pearl, the poisonous water would not be able to harm him. The pieces of glittering golden scales were like a set of armor, protecting him completely. Chapter 15:15. The ball of light also felt the terrifying dragon power, and seemed to understand the joy in the pair of huge dragon eyes, and realized that something was wrong. But the way out was completely blocked by the dragon body, and the ball of light had no way to escape. Woo-woo. There was a strange cry from the ball of light, as if there was a life calling. Hey, is it like the hidden mysterious sword, and the spirit is calling? Tang Zheng pondered. The hidden mysterious sword seemed to feel the threat of the cry, and also made a sharp sword sound, responding to the ball of light. The huge dragon claw gently stroked the hidden mysterious sword, and the sword sound became louder, as if it could not wait to compete with the ball of light. Good, then come. Tang Zheng raised his head and shouted. The hidden mysterious sword was connected to his mind, and naturally understood what he meant. It released a blazing light, and with an unparalleled momentum, it slashed downward. The ball of light immediately reacted, and the light that was much dimmer suddenly lit up, and was not inferior to the hidden mysterious sword at all. Woo! Whoosh! The two beams of light quickly collided with each other. At this moment, the sun seemed to explode, and a dazzling light burst out from the bottom of the deep pool. Boom! There was an earth-shattering sound, and the earth trembled. The hard rocks around were like tofu, cut into pieces, and then quickly collapsed. The deep pool completely collapsed, and its appearance changed greatly. It expanded outward several times, and the small pool became a lake. The moment the pool collapsed, the others had already flown in all directions to avoid being contaminated by the poisonous water. The black water rippled, and the scene was very shocking. The waterfall that fell from the sky quickly replenished the water and filled the small lake that had just formed. Everyone looked at the scene in shock and were deeply shocked. Their eyes were attracted to the lake at the same time, and there were rays of light coming from below, breaking through the water, and one after another, cutting open the water surface, and a huge whirlpool appeared on the lake. Look! Xiaobai had sharp eyes and pointed to the whirlpool and shouted, "Swish! Swish! Swish!" Everyone looked at the whirlpool, and in an instant, they opened their eyes wide and saw an unusual scene. A change occurred in the center of the whirlpool. A ball of clear water bubbled up like a spring. What's going on? The ancestor had lived by the waterfall for 10,000 years, but he had never seen such a scene. It was really an eye-opener. Xiaobai chuckled. Of course it's a good thing. After all, Qingshui is better than black water. The clear spring water seemed to have a magical power. It rapidly expanded outwards, diluting the rest of the black water. The black color faded, and finally, it became transparent. Does this mean there's no poison? Xiaobai pointed at the clear water and asked. The ancestor nodded subconsciously because the clear water was no different from ordinary drinking water. They witnessed the purification of the poisonous water with their own eyes. It was not like the sudden change when the waterfall parted, but a gradual change. There was a big difference between the two, as if it meant something. This mysterious feeling lingered in everyone's hearts, but there was no way to verify it. No one dared to throw themselves into the clear water and test it out. Moreover, the situation under the water was unknown, and no one was in the mood to test the water. They stretched out their necks, trying to see the situation under the water. They only saw balls of light flickering, two forces intersecting with each other, fighting back and forth. It was incomparably intense. Under the water, the ball of light became weaker and weaker. They could vaguely see the true appearance of the ball of light. After this bitter battle, Tang Zheng could already confirm that the ball of light was a divine weapon. As for the true appearance of the divine weapon, he could not guess for the time being. Boom! With a loud sound, the hidden profound sword once again slashed on the ball of light. The ball of light trembled violently a few times, and the light became weaker. The pair of huge dragon eyes suddenly shrank and grinned. "Ha ha! Let's see how long you can last." Swish! Swish! In fact, Tang Zheng was very clear that the hidden profound sword was because of his support, so its power increased greatly. But this ball of light was relying on its own consciousness to fight. Comparing the two, the difference was obvious. The hidden profound sword obviously had the upper hand, which was why it was gradually suppressing the ball of light. Tang Zheng was secretly delighted, and once again waved the hidden profound sword. Just at this time, The ball of light was completely extinguished, like a light bulb. The key was pressed. The bottom of the water dimmed a lot. Tang Zheng subconsciously stopped. The hidden profound sword was raised high, but did not descend. He curiously stared at the ball of light that had completely dimmed. No, it was no longer light, but a black ball of light. Shaking his dragon tail, he leaned forward, trying to see the opponent's true appearance. Boom! Just at this time, as if lightning flashed and thunder roared, the black ball of light burst out with a never-before-seen dazzling light, almost making people forget the concept of time. Tang Zheng only felt pain on his body. Puff! A piece of scale armor was cut off, and fresh blood gushed out, dyeing the surrounding water red. The surrounding water did not become clear like the surface of the water. Instead, it was still as black as ink, stained with blood. The ink was mixed with traces of bright red, which was especially dazzling. Hiss! Tang Zheng subconsciously sucked in a breath of cold air. His dragon eyes were wide open, like two lanterns hanging high up in the air. A dazzling golden light shot out from his pupils, shining towards the bottom of the water. A wave of dizziness stimulated his brain, and his heart trembled. He understood that this was the effect of the poison in the water. This time, the poison was clearly even stronger, as if it had condensed all the poison in the pool and entered his body through the wound. One had to know that Tang Zheng had originally cultivated the primal chaos Vajra spell and had an indestructible body. Furthermore, because he had transformed into a dragon, his entire body was covered in scales, making him even more impregnable and almost impossible to harm. However, there were always exceptions to everything, and there was no way to be absolutely safe. The ball of light continued to release all of its power, exploding with the most powerful attack. Then, Tang Zheng was in a miserable state. He was actually injured, and his blood flowed out, causing the poison to enter his body. Since you're so cunning and want my life, then don't even think about having an easy time. Tang Zheng slashed at the ball of light with his sword, causing it to dim once again. The ball of light seemed to have suffered quite a bit of impact and quickly sank to the bottom of the water. Tang Zheng's blood was aroused, and he did not give up. With a shake of his dragon tail, he chased after him. With a sweep of his dragon claws, he firmly controlled the ball of light. A certain amount of weak light was simply unable to cover its body, and the blood on the dragon's body flowed along the dragon claws to the ball of light. Chapter 15-16. The blood and light merged together, and the struggling of the ball of light immediately ceased. Unknowingly, Tang Zheng heard a voice. "Let go of me." Huh. Tang Zheng's anger subsided a lot. The voice was so clear and different from before. He guessed that something must have happened to the light. "Ah, your blood." The voice sounded again, sounding very panicked. The blood had firmly wrapped around the light, and the situation was under control. Tang Zheng was worried that there would be other changes, so he rushed into the sky. The moment before he rushed out of the water, he shook his body and returned to his human form. The matter of the Dragon Clan was confidential, and he did not want outsiders to know. Splash! The water pillar soared into the sky, and with the sound of breaking water, Tang Zheng soared into the air. Everyone uniformly looked at him, staring at the ball of light in his hand that gradually lost its light, revealing its true appearance. Scepter! The great ancestor screamed in shock. His eyes almost popped out as he stared at Tang Zheng's hand. Tang Zheng looked down and was stunned. A scepter was quietly placed in his hand. The scepter was about half a meter long, and it was crystal clear and fiery red. A few simple straight lines ran through the head and tail of the scepter, showing a kind of beauty that was simple to the extreme. Sacred inscriptions. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up. He recognized them at a glance. They were the sacred inscriptions he was familiar with. It also has 3 sacred inscriptions. He stared at the 3 straight lines, comparing them with the sacred inscriptions of his hidden sword. It was hard to tell which one was better. Suddenly, he understood that this sacred weapon was not inferior to the hidden sword. No wonder it was so difficult to deal with. The hidden sword had merged with two sacred weapons to become what it was today. It could be imagined how powerful this scepter was. Traces of blood flowed around the scepter, showing signs of seeping into it. Tang Zheng moved his head. This was very similar to the situation of dripping blood to recognize its owner. However, dripping blood to recognize its owner required a corresponding chant. Moreover, the dripping blood had to be the heart's blood and not ordinary blood. However, Tang Zheng's blood also contained a lot of energy. Therefore, when the blood flowed around the scepter, this happened. That's not right. Dripping blood to recognize its owner is a complicated process. It can't be done by just relying on the magic weapon itself. Why would this scepter have such a big reaction? Tang Zheng soon found an unusual clue. Whoosh! After the blood flowed a few rounds, it suddenly flashed and disappeared into the scepter. Bloodthirsty scepter! The great ancestor shouted. His eyes were full of disbelief. His breathing became rapid and his chest rose and fell as he stared at the scepter. As if it had heard those words, the scepter also buzzed and trembled, showing signs of breaking free from Tang Zheng's control. Tang Zheng's head trembled. He understood that he had completely misjudged the situation. After the scepter came into contact with his blood, it was not controlled. Instead, it deliberately stopped and waited for an opportunity to absorb his blood. After all, Tang Zheng was so powerful. His blood was also extraordinary. It was not easy to absorb his blood. Therefore, the scepter deliberately showed weakness to lower Tang Zheng's guard. Then, it took the opportunity to absorb his blood. Once it absorbed the blood, its aura completely changed. The exhaustion from the bitter battle was completely made up, and it emitted a bewitching red light. Stop it quickly. Don't let it escape. The great ancestor shouted anxiously. He seemed to be very afraid of the scepter. Tang Zheng felt the scepter trembling more and more violently, as if it was going to break free from his hand. He hurriedly used his power to suppress it. Seeing this, Xiaobai could not bear to let Tang Zheng face such a huge threat alone. Without hesitation, he leaped and flew in front of Tang Zheng. "Master, let me help you." Tang Zheng looked at Xiaobai and his heart moved. This scepter was an item from the sky. Back then, the imperial family had racked their brains to get it. Even so, the imperial family had paid a painful price for it. Xiaobai was a descendant of the imperial family. If he helped the imperial family fulfill their last wish, it would be a blessing. Moreover, the power of the scepter was limitless, and it was an ownerless item. Since Tang Zheng already possessed the hidden profound sword, he naturally would not covet this magical treasure. He might as well give it to Little White, allowing him to be like a tiger that had grown wings. It would bring him great benefits in the future. "Xiaobai, drip your blood on it and subdue it," Tang Zheng hurriedly said. Xiaobai was stunned. He did not expect Tang Zheng to be so generous. He said excitedly, "Master, it's yours to subdue. Don't dawdle. It's struggling more and more. If we let it escape, it will be difficult to catch it." Tang Zheng urged. Xiaobai knew that Tang Zheng was a man of his word. Since he said so, he could only do as he was told. However, the gratitude in his heart was beyond words. He knew very well how precious this scepter was and how significant it was to the imperial family and to him. Hearing this, the others were stunned, especially the ancestor. He was very clear about the extraordinary meaning of the scepter. Moreover, he knew how powerful the scepter was. Tang Zheng did not covet the scepter. Instead, he did not hesitate to let Xiaobai drip his blood on it. This kind of spirit made him feel ashamed of his inferiority. He used to think that Tang Zheng was a treacherous villain who deceived Xiaobai. He also wanted to expose his disguise. However, this was a real benefit, and Tang Zheng was willing to give it up. This could not be faked at all. If he did not sincerely treat Little White well, how could he be willing to give up such a huge benefit? Suddenly, he looked at Tang Zheng with a more complicated gaze. There was a trace of admiration in it. The fog and the others did not know the true use and value of the scepter. However, after experiencing the twists and turns, They knew that the scepter was not ordinary. Seeing that His Majesty had a chance to subdue the scepter, their hearts beat fast. Their eyes were burning as they watched the scene unfold. Xiaobai had already started to drip his blood on the scepter. A drop of blood flew out from his heart. Under the guidance of his fingertip, it flew directly to the scepter. At this moment, the great ancestor seemed to have been struck by lightning. A memory from the deepest part of his mind flashed through his mind, and deep fear surged in his eyes as he shouted, "Your Majesty, quickly stop!" The others looked at the great ancestor, who had such an abnormal attitude. They did not understand why he wanted to stop such a good thing. Xiaobai heard the great ancestor, but he did not care. Since his master asked him to drip his blood on the scepter, he would definitely carry out his master's order. On the other hand, Tangzheng frowned. He did not understand the great ancestor's intention. However, the arrow was already on the bow, so he had to do it. Poof! The blood dripped onto the scepter. The red light on the scepter suddenly converged. Then, like an atomic bomb, it expanded outward with a bang. Only the color of blood was left between heaven and earth. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.